The next day, Lucian stood at the edge of the training chamber, a swirling orb of darkness hovering above his palm. The sphere pulsed quietly, absorbing ambient light as it spun. An implosion of the world's brightness collapsed into shadow. He clenched his wrist to stay steady, watching as the light twisted unnaturally into the vortex. It hissed softly like a breathing void. "Try not to blind yourself this time," Hecate called out behind him, her voice dry with thinly veiled irritation. Lucian flushed. Yeah, rookie mistake. I'm concentrating now, all right." He opened his hand, releasing the darkness. A core of blinding white light erupted from the center and shot forward in a dazzling beam. The radiant blast struck the floor and scattered like shattered glass, brilliant, ephemeral, and completely harmless. When the light faded, not a single scratch marked the stone floor. It gleamed as pristine as before. Lucian squinted at the spot and muttered, "Nothing happened." "Obviously," Hecate said with a sneer. "There was no force behind that. Congratulations, you've invented magical sunscreen." Lucian's face contorted in irritation. "What's with the sarcasm?" She folded her arms. "You know why it failed?" Lucian sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. "Yeah, light has no mass. There's no impact. But come on, isn't this all magical? Why does physics suddenly matter?" Hecate's gaze turned sharper. "That's where most gods get it wrong. They think mortals are fools for applying science to the divine. But in truth, mortals are often right. The divine isn't exempt from the laws of existence. It just operates deeper within them. Gods just don't like being questioned." Lucian raised an eyebrow. "And yet, you don't sound like one of those gods." "I am," she replied with a small smile. "But I have the self-control to keep my arrogance in check. Just because I'm beyond mortal limitations doesn't mean I'm blind to mortal insight. I don't fear what you all might discover." With a flick of her wrist, she changed the topic. "Now, what's your solution to your little flashbang problem?" Lucian hesitated, thinking, well, if the issue is mass, then maybe I should apply the law of conservation of mass. "That's a route," Hecate admitted, "but it's overcomplicating things." Lucian blinked. "Okay, then what?" "Think. Darkness also lacks mass. Yet it behaves differently than light, doesn't it?" He frowned. "Right. It swallows, binds, suffocates. It has weight. But why? I won't spell it out. I'll give you a single hint. The source." Lucian repeated the word to himself. The source, the source. Then his eyes widened in realization. "I've been using ambient light, drawing from the environment. It's weak. It's scattered. But if I generate light from within..." He paused, and his expression turned grim. "It's harder. My darkness comes from inside, so the light must too." Hecate's lips curled into a smile. "Now you're thinking." Lucian stared at his hands, murmuring, "Then I need to extract light from my inner shadow. Because a shadow, it's where both light and darkness coexist. If I can't invert it, if I can pull the light out and let it dominate." A grin crept across his face. "Then I can cheat the system." Hecate's smile immediately vanished. "Cheat? Don't worry. It's not a shortcut. More like training wheels. A learning method." She narrowed her eyes. "Fine. Then show me." Lucian raised a finger. "I need a full-body mirror." With a snap of her fingers, Hecate conjured one. Lucian stepped forward and began removing his shirt. "All right," Hecate muttered with a frown. Then he pulled off his pants, leaving only his boxers. "Lucian," she warned sharply, "this better not be some ridiculous ritual." Lucian snorted. "Relax. Just watch." He summoned a blade of dark energy and, without hesitation, sliced across his wrist. Blood spilled, yet rather than falling, it floated, suspended by his will. Crimson drops shimmered midair, crackling with raw magic. Understanding dawned in Hecate's eyes. The suicidal branding. Lucian guided the blood with precision, tracing it over his arms. The liquid etched glowing sigils across his skin. Intricate, ancient runes that pulsed with intent. They mirrored each other, stretching toward the center of his chest. Hecate read them as they formed. Darkness, shadow, light. A complete conversion loop. And more than that, he was awakening his divine bloodline, strengthening his blessing through self-sacrifice. But then he added more symbols, ones not meant for magic. The blood ran down his torso, legs, ankles. He was pale now, breathing heavy, pushing his body to the edge. Finally, the blood climbed his neck, curved across his cheeks, and converged at the center of his forehead, forming a single radiant sun. The cut sealed, the bleeding stopped, and the runes ignited. One by one, they flared crimson, activating in sequence. Then the transformation began. Lucian's skin darkened into a golden brown, sun-kissed and radiant. His black hair lifted and bleached into pure white. His brows turned snow-pale. The sun on his forehead glowed like dawn. When he opened his eyes, their former crimson hue had vanished, replaced by molten gold. Hecate stared, expression unreadable. He actually used blood magic to alter his entire aesthetic. If she weren't so impressed, she'd have smacked him on the spot. Lucian admired himself in the mirror, clearly pleased, until a sudden thought passed his mind. Wait, is this racist? The day after, Hecate watched Lucian with a scrutinizing gaze, her arms folded, expression unreadable. His transformation had left an impression, radiant, awe-inspiring even. But as he admired himself in the mirror, basking in his new form, something inside her shifted. What began as admiration slowly curdled into concern. It was the look in his eyes, the glint, the smirk, the posture. She'd seen that expression too many times before. It was the same untamed arrogance that all gods wore like second skin. Lucian, she said calmly, but there was an edge beneath her words. He responded lazily, half-lidded golden eyes still locked onto his reflection. How do you feel? She asked, her voice measured, deliberate. Lucian tilted his head. How do I feel? His lips curled into a knowing grin. Exalted. The tone, it was off. Subtle but different. The usual thread of humility he carried, even beneath his usual arrogance, was gone. I see, Hecate murmured. It's the side effect of enhancing your legacy. You've inherited the arrogance of divinity. Lucian's eyes narrowed. Side effect. His voice sharpened. Are you implying there's a flaw in me? Hecate's brow furrowed. Change back. Lucian scoffed. Why? This is who I was meant to be. I've optimized myself. She took a slow breath, reining in her irritation. His arrogance wasn't new, but this was unhinged. You believe you're a god now? She asked coldly. Lucian gave a low laugh. No, I'm beyond gods. I stand between mortality and godhood, power without limitation, strength without obedience. I am the Unbound. He turned to face her, golden irises glowing like miniature suns. Tell me, Hecate, if you're shackled by divine law, bound by oaths and fate, can you still call yourself a god? You're walking a dangerous path, she warned, voice like steel. Speak like that around Olympus, and they'll label it heresy. Lucian smiled faintly. So truth is heresy now? Hecate watched him silently. She needed to understand how far this delusion had burrowed. If you're neither man nor god, then what are you? Lucian chuckled, resting a hand against his chin. An angel, he said softly. Isn't it obvious? Then he winked. Babe. The air crackled. Do not call me that, Hecate snapped. Her magic surged like a rising storm. Say it again, and I will smite you. Unbothered, Lucian lifted his chin. I was born to radiate. It's in the name, Luciolite, not Blackheart. The name doesn't suit me. From now on, I shall be known as Lucian Brightheart. Hecate pinched the bridge of her nose. Lucian, this Brightheart form is going to be a serious problem. But Lucian barely heard her. His voice rose with growing grandeur. Lucian Brightheart, the angel beloved by the stars, the one unshackled by restriction, the champion of radiance. You can't just give yourself a bunch of titles, Hecate muttered. It's not a LinkedIn profile. And who made that rule? Lucian said with a grin. He raised a hand and gathered light at his fingertip. A radiant orb began to form, a miniature sun, glowing brighter with each breath. Golden energy rippled off him in waves. His silver-white hair lifted as if underwater, and brilliant wings of pure light unfurled from his back. He slowly rose from the ground. Now, that was better. Now, people had to look up at him. His smirk returned. Do you know why the sun is revered? He asked, eyes half-lidded. Because it's untouchable. You can't stare at it. You can't reach it. You can't defy it. You can only bow to it. Hecate didn't reply. The sun is a force of life and destruction. It gives, but it also takes. The fool Icarus thought he could grasp it. He soared on wings of ambition, until the sun judged him unworthy and melted him from the sky. Lucian turned his gaze upward, watching the tiny sun hover above his hand. His voice softened with reverence. But I'm not Icarus. The sun chose me. It burns for me. I am its sword. I decide who basks in its warmth, and who is scoured by its fire. Hecate stared at him with a deadpan expression. Right? And I just decided something, too. Lucian glanced down. You're incredibly annoying. He blinked. Pardon? And your speeches? She rolled her eyes. I think I just developed a migraine. Lucian let out a theatrical sigh. It seems my enlightenment has fallen on deaf ears. Lucian, she said flatly, sleep. His eyes widened just for a second, then rolled back into his head. The sun vanished. Lucian collapsed, his wings of light flickering out like dying stars. Feathers of radiance drifted down, burning to ash before they could hit the floor. Hecate stepped forward, catching one glowing feather. It landed in her palm, hot, vibrant, before it combusted and vanished. Hot, she muttered dryly, shaking her head. Despite everything, she couldn't deny it. He had power. Even as he lay unconscious, he looked the part, more celestial being than man. If only you weren't such an unbearable show-off, she sighed, kneeling beside him. She reached for the golden sun symbol on his forehead, but it shifted. The radiant markings darkened, melting into pitch-black ink. His hair dulled, returning to its midnight hue. His skin paled once more. The light was fading with the day, spreading her divine awareness. Hecate chuckled under her breath. Of course it's tied to the sun. He can't maintain this form without daylight. She looked out the window. The horizon was streaked with orange and violet. As dramatic as always, but at least nature did my job for me. The final traces of his transformation bled downward into his chest, pooling into a single black sun etched above his heart. A dormant seal, awaiting sunrise. Elsewhere, in a distant chamber shared by three sisters. Whoa. Atropos and Lachesis stared with blank expressions as Clotho sprinted in circles, fists pumping in the air. We got ourselves a sun-kissed, shirtless, silver-haired daddy in the making. And he glows. This is a double event. Clotho, Atropos said calmly. Stop. Clotho froze mid-sprint. She turned slowly, lifted her chin, and raised a hand to her head. In a perfect mimicry of Lucian, she slicked back her hair. Then, in his exact voice, said, And why should I? Lachesis immediately slapped a hand over her mouth, shoulders shaking with silent laughter. Atropos's eye twitched. Her lips quivered. She was losing the fight.
Hey, everyone. If you enjoy my quantum audiobooks, you can support me by becoming a Patreon member. Your support helps me keep creating, and you'll get exclusive perks. You can also access my audiobooks directly through Google Drive. Check out the link in the description. Now, let's get started.
Lucian woke up the next day, groaning loudly as he covered his face with his hands. Kill me now. What the hell was that? Still lying in his sleeping quarters, he rolled around, reluctant to get up. He didn't want to face the consequences of his actions. Repeatedly, he slammed his fist against his chest, right where the tattoo of a black sun was marked. Stupid, stupid, stupid. By the gods, that was so embarrassing. Suddenly, he bolted upright, one hand covering his mouth as his mind raced to formulate a plan. I'll have to run away, change my identity, not to mention my appearance. I'll become untraceable, so no one can find me. Start over in the countryside, fall in love, and create a secret family away from everyone. That sounds perfect. Just as he was about to put his genius plan into action, a voice cut through his thoughts. Lucian, you do realize my divine senses allow me to hear you, right? I know you're awake, so get up. I fix you breakfast. Hecate's voice rang out, and Lucian immediately turned bright red, groaning in pure mortification. "Kill me. Erase my memory, forever if you will," he pleaded dramatically. After a moment of self-pity, he begrudgingly got up, dragging his feet as he stepped out of his room. At the end of a long rectangular table, Hecate sat casually, leaning back with her legs crossed. She rested her chin against her knuckles, amusement dancing in her eyes as she took in Lucian's miserable expression. The sudden urge to tease him stirred in her heart. She gestured toward the opposite end of the table, where a plate of food awaited him. "Go on, eat before it gets cold." Lucian kept his gaze lowered, avoiding eye contact as he trudged over. The chair scraped noisily against the floor as he pulled it back and slumped into it. "Did you make this?" he muttered, eyeing the variety of food in front of him. Hecate scoffed. "Of course not. What do you take me for? Since when do I cook? This is merely food that has been offered to me. Eat as much as you want. I have plenty to spare." Lucian nodded, still avoiding her gaze. "Thank you for the food," he said quietly. Hecate leaned forward, resting her arms on the table. Her fingers intertwined, and she propped her chin atop her hands. A mischievous smirk curled her lips. "So, tell me, bright heart, how are you feeling? Did you get a nice, restful sleep?" Lucian choked mid-bite, his eyes widening in horror. He coughed violently, pounding on his chest until he finally managed to swallow. "Please," he wheezed, "don't call me that." Hecate laughed, utterly unmoved by her disciple's suffering. "So you remember everything you did and how you acted in that form, huh?" she asked, tilting her head. Lucian sighed, nodding. "Unfortunately, yes. It's not like I have a dual personality or anything, but I gain this overwhelming confidence. It's still me, but my words and actions are dictated by that self-assurance." Hecate hummed thoughtfully. "Can I ask you something?" Lucian said. She gestured for him to continue. "Was my great-grandfather like that? Like how I was? You were a titan during his time, so you must have interacted with him at some point." Hecate chuckled, shaking her head. "No, Helios was nothing like that. In fact, he was the opposite, humble kind. He had lived for so many years that he had grown tired of it." "Seriously? Then why was I?" Before he could finish, Hecate answered for him. "It's because you're still 1/3 mortal. When you enhance your divine lineage, your mortality, which usually keeps you grounded, gets suppressed. Instead, the hubris of the divine takes over." Lucian nodded, stuffing his mouth with food. Hecate then asked, "So, did you manage to grasp the concept of converting your darkness into light?" Lucian let out an exhausted sigh, shaking his head. I didn't have enough time. I was put to sleep before I had the chance to," he said, his expression growing deadpan. "I'm not sorry. You were an annoying brat," Hecate stated unapologetically. She tapped her fingers against the table before exhaling. "All right, finish up and enter your bright heart form." Lucian groaned. Please don't call it that." "Also," he added, "I thought you hated that form. Didn't you dislike that form? Why would you want me to activate it again?" Hecate smirked. "Oh, I do hate it, but I can't deny its functionality and power. You really outdid yourself with this, you know? The personality is awful, but the strength? That's all that really matters. Good work." Lucian scratched his cheek, feeling embarrassed at the rare compliment from his teacher. "We're going to train it and see if we can rein in that vanity of yours. Be warned, if you annoy me too much, I will go heavy-handed. So, if you suffer, you have only yourself to blame. Now hurry up." Lucian immediately started wolfing down his food like a starving beast. He stood up with his mouth still full, chewing furiously as he gave a sloppy salute to signal that he was ready. Hecate sighed, shaking her head. With a snap of her fingers, the space around them shifted. Everything vanished into a swirl of purple mist. The surroundings dissolved into an endless void, the ground covered in a ceaseless flow of dark, violet energy. The mist swirled past their ankles, obscuring the ground beneath them. There were no walls, no ceiling, only an impenetrable darkness stretching infinitely in all directions. "Go on, transform," Hecate ordered. Lucian swallowed the last bit of food in his mouth and let out a heavy sigh. "I just woke up, and you're already making me work." Man, this is going to be a long day, he muttered. Closing his eyes, he sent a pulse of magic toward the tattoo on his chest. Beneath his shirt, the ink-black sun turned a deep, blood-crimson hue, its glow bleeding through the fabric. Markings spread from the tattoo, snaking down his arms and up his neck, pulsing with raw power. His skin darkened, losing its pale tone, while his hair faded to a stark, snowy white. When he opened his eyes, they gleamed with a brilliant golden light. Hecate grimaced the moment he blinked. Even the way he blinks is arrogant. How annoying. Lucian glanced down at himself and frowned, realizing he was still wearing shirt. His expression soured. How are they supposed to admire my figure like this? With a quick tug, he grabbed the fabric with both hands and tore it away in one swift motion. He smirked. Much better. Hecate sighed, already feeling a headache coming on. Lucian flashed her a teasing grin. Look at that. You just couldn't get enough of me, huh? Had to see me again so soon? I'm flattered, really. Hecate ruffled her hair in exasperation. Lucian, have you forgotten something? Or has that arrogance of yours made you stupid? Did you already forget how I put you to sleep with a single word? I didn't even have to say it out loud. Her expression darkened, mystic energy swirling in her gaze. I'm still a goddess, and you're my domain. If I were you, I'd tread carefully. Lucian merely smiled, nodding as if in understanding. You're not wrong. You are a goddess, so for now, you still hold power over me. Hecate narrowed her eyes. For now. Lucian chuckled behind his fist. Come on, babe, let's not be slow about this. Hecate's eye twitched. Why, in the name of Zeus, does he keep calling me babe? Lucian casually slid his hands into his pockets, leaning forward slightly. How long do you think that advantage of yours is going to last? You do have a basic understanding of my growth, don't you? Sooner or later, I'm going to surpass you. He bared his sharp canines in a grin. So enjoy your power over me while you still can. Beautiful. Before he could finish, Hecate appeared before him in an instant, her fist already cocked back. With a single, brutal punch, she sent him flying. Lucian ragdolled across the misty ground, kicking up clouds of violet haze as he tumbled. Hecate flexed her fingers and glanced at her blood-stained knuckles, a grin spreading across her face. Wow, now that was satisfying. I should do that more often. Lucian groaned as he pushed himself up from the ground, his expression eerily blank. Blood trickled from his lips, but he didn't seem fazed. Raising a hand, golden light pulsed at his fingertips. He wiped his palm across his face, and the wound vanished instantly, along with any trace of blood. Then, with a powerful burst of energy, white wings erupted from his back. He shot into the air, hovering above Hecate with a cold, focused gaze. Congratulations, he said, voice smooth but dangerous. You managed to draw my blood. I'll make sure to return the favor. With a snap of his fingers, countless golden blades materialized around him, floating in a dazzling, deadly array. Hecate, however, simply smirked. I'm afraid I'm not your opponent for this match. She snapped her fingers, and the mist in front of her began to rise, twisting and coiling into the form of a man. The dense fog wove itself together, solidifying, until it exploded outward, revealing a figure identical to Lucian. Black hair, crimson eyes, the same smirk, but lacking the arrogance. You, Hecate said, her voice carrying a note of amusement, are going to be battling yourself. Hecate raised an eyebrow as she noticed Lucian's face grow unexpectedly serious. She smiled and asked, Why so serious all of a sudden? Because it's me I'm up against. That was all Lucian said, causing Hecate to roll her eyes. Go get him, Blackheart, Hecate commanded, her tone laced with amusement. Blackheart turned into a wisp of shadow just as Lucian extended his wing, blocking a scythe made of pure, condensed darkness that just appeared above him. Light and darkness clashed for an instant, just long enough for an explosion to erupt between them. Both Lucians fell through the air, landing with effortless grace on the mist-covered ground. Blackheart dashed forward, kicking up the mist as he moved. Lucian raised a hand and blocked his punch, absorbing the impact. The sheer force of Blackheart's strike pushed him back, his feet sliding against the ground. He came to an abrupt stop and flicked his wrist, though his face remained impassive. Lucian raised 2 fingers, and an array of radiant light crosses manifested around him. They shot forward at the speed of light, cutting clean paths through the mist. Blackheart's eyes gleamed a faint red as he swayed, weaving his body from side to side, narrowly dodging the attack. Behind him, explosions rang out as the crosses struck their targets. In a sudden burst of brilliance, Lucian's body flashed. In less than a second, he materialized above Blackheart, aimed straight for his face. Blackheart's eyes widened. He barely had time to react before Lucian's knee smashed into him. His figure was sent hurtling through the air, past Hecate, who watched with growing interest. "Tell me, how does it feel to be hit at the speed of light?" Lucian smirked. His eyes widened as he quickly moved to evade. Blackheart's body had reappeared, flying up from beneath his shadow, a long blade poised to pierce him. Lucian twisted away, but not fast enough. The black blade slashed across his side. Blackheart took a few steps forward, flicking the blood from his blade before resting it on his shoulder. He gave Lucian a smug look, his nose still bleeding from the earlier attack. "I don't know. You tell me. How does it feel to be betrayed by your own shadow?" Lucian sighed, unfazed. "So it can talk." He ran a hand over his wound, and light particles shimmered around it, instantly sealing the cut. Blackheart grinned savagely. "I can do more than that. Come out, boys." Lucian's shadow rippled unnaturally before erupting. From its depths, monstrous forms crawled forth, his own shadow soldiers. 3 shadow drakens burst out, slithering through the mist at unnatural speeds before lunging toward Lucian. "How barbaric!" Lucian muttered, summoning 3 radiant orbs, each a concentrated fusion of yellow and pure white light. The orbs streaked through the air, allowing themselves to be swallowed whole by the draken's gaping maws. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, light flared from within the draken's cores. Their bodies ruptured into shadowy fragments, floating aimlessly before dissolving in a blinding flash. Before the light fully dissipated, Lucian and Blackheart had already moved, meeting in the middle with their weapons drawn. Lucian thrust his shimmering spear forward, the spearhead slicing cleanly through the air. Blackheart swung his black katana in response, the lusterless blade trailing darkness. The clash sent out a powerful shockwave, pushing back the mist and revealing the solid ground beneath them. As the force subsided, so did they, vanishing and reappearing in bursts of movement, their weapons colliding in a blur of flashing light and darkness. Each clash sent out another shockwave, their forms indistinguishable as they moved with relentless speed. Hecate watched with detached interest, her eyes tracking their movements effortlessly. Not that she needed her eyes. Her divine senses were more than enough to follow their battle. If a casual observer had seen just a glimpse of their fight, they might have assumed both Lucians were equally matched in power and technique. However, to Hecate, Blackheart has the upper hand. He was born from the Lucian who spent years mastering darkness and shadows, refining his combat style around them. Meanwhile, Brightheart is struggling. He's only just gained access to light magic, not even 24 hours ago. But what he lacks in finesse and control, he makes up for with sheer explosive power. Not to mention, he's a fast learner. Lucian clicked his tongue as Blackheart's scythe sliced through his spear shaft, splitting it in 2. Before the spearhead could fully dissipate into particles of light, Lucian lunged forward and threw it straight at Blackheart. Blackheart attempted to block with his scythe, but the spearhead shattered the blade like glass, continuing past his waist and slicing into his skin. A nasty wound appeared, yet he didn't flinch. No blood flowed. The cut was seared shut by the lingering light. Their eyes flashed, Lucian's glowing gold, Blackheart's burning red, as both activated their foresight. But Blackheart moved first. He raised a hand, and before Lucian could react, the shadows beneath his feet surged up, forming bandage-like tendrils that wrapped tightly around his body. The dark restraints coiled around him like a mummy, leaving only his arms outstretched. Blackheart clenched his fist slightly, causing the bindings to tighten. "Look, handsome. I'd hate to ruin such a pretty face, so why don't you call it quits?" MMPHM, SHMMP. Lucian's muffled voice remained calm. Blackheart leaned in, placing a hand to his ear mockingly. "What was that, buddy? You need to speak up. I can't quite hear you." He scoffed and tightened his grip further. Hecate, controlling the surrounding mist, was the first to notice something was off. The mist reacted strangely, retreating from Lucian as if giving him space. Blackheart was next to realize it. He felt it first. An unbearable wave of heat slammed into him, the air around Lucian growing dangerously hot. The surrounding temperature skyrocketed, forcing Blackheart to send out more darkness, attempting to reinforce the restraints and siphon away the heat. But it wasn't enough. Sweat gathered on his forehead. "Tisish, bastard's gonna melt the mist right out of me." Hecate, observing, raised an eyebrow in admiration. "Seriously, how is any other demigod supposed to contend with him?" She sighed, secretly pitying any of her children foolish enough to make him their enemy. Blackheart grimaced as Lucian's bindings ignited, engulfed in golden white flames. The shadows burned away to nothing. Not even a trace remained for Blackheart to use for teleportation. As the restraints vanished, another wave of heat pulsed outward. Blackheart clenched his jaw as his skin burned, sweat evaporating into steam. Even Hecate shifted uncomfortably. Lucian now stood bathed in a radiant golden aura, white-hot flames swirling around him. His silver-white hair rose slightly, swaying as if caught in an unseen breeze. Taking a single step forward, steam hissed from beneath his feet. "You told me to call it quit," Lucian said, his voice steady, unyielding. "Let me ask you this then. Why should I?" His golden eyes locked onto Blackheart. "You want to bind and hold me in place? If so, I ask you, can the sun be bound? Can it be contained?" He took another step, and the ground beneath him cracked from the heat. "No, then neither can I." His gaze sharpened. "Apologies." Blackheart tilted his head, amused. "What?" He glanced toward Hecate with a look that said, "Are you seeing this?" Hecate simply covered her face and looked away. Blackheart turned back to Lucian, ignoring the burning pain crawling across his skin. "Oh yeah? And why should I apologize?" Lucian stopped a few steps away, flames roaring around him. "Because you've committed an unforgivable sin. You've done something foolish while wearing my face." His eyes gleamed with a fiery intensity. "So apologize on behalf of your creator for your foolish existence." "Hey, genius. I think you forgot a small detail if you're trying to intimidate me with your fire," Blackheart said with a snarling grin. His black hair lifted slightly, wavering in the heat before steam began to rise from his body. Then, in an instant, he combusted into beautiful black flames. Even parts of his hair transformed into fire, and his red eyes burned with fierce defiance. He looked like an infernal demon, as if he had crawled straight from the depths of hell, glowing with a dark radiance. As their flames clashed, the surrounding heat became almost unbearable. Lucian threw his head back and laughed heartily, his voice ringing with amusement. Blackheart mirrored him, laughing in the same manner. Both of them looked up as they belly laughed. Then, suddenly, Blackheart's expression shifted to panic. He instinctively crossed his arms in front of him. Lucian's golden white fist came flying in a devastating uppercut, twisting as it connected. The sheer force lifted Blackheart off the ground. But before he could be launched away, Lucian pivoted, seized him midair, and slammed him toward the ground. His golden flames, now turning nearly white, roared around him as he increased their intensity. Blackheart hit the polished ground with such force that cracks splintered outward like a spiderweb. The surface shattered like fragile glass, and he was driven deep into the impact crater. His cheeks puffed up, then he vomited blood. But the heat was so intense that the blood evaporated the moment it surfaced, turning into a crimson haze. Lucian lifted his fist, watching as the remnants of blood burned off his skin. His cold gaze locked on a Blackheart's battered form. "That was your second sin," he said icily. "You dare compare your cursed flames to the sacred fire of the sun? And in front of me, no less." Lucian scoffed. It was so pitiful I couldn't help but laugh. Blackheart's body trembled, whether from pain or battle hunger, no one could tell. But a wide, bloodthirsty grin remained plastered on his face, his blood-stained teeth bared in defiance. Suddenly, multiple magic circles materialized around Lucian, glowing with ominous energy as Blackheart's aura flared. Despite this, Lucian's expression remained indifferent. Cursed weapons, swords, spears, polearms, daggers, axes, burst from the magic circles like rockets, all radiating dark energy as they honed in on him. Yet, Lucian merely tilted his body, effortlessly weaving through the onslaught. He danced through the barrage of cursed blades with almost lazy precision. Blackheart, still kneeling, glanced down at his trembling hands, where fragmented bone pierced through torn skin, bleeding profusely. He grimaced. "Even with my healing darkness, this will take time and drain a ton of my energy." His thoughts were interrupted as his eyes widened. Lucian tilted his head at the last second, allowing a two-bladed weapon to fly past his face, only to raise his hand and catch its handle with a single motion. Landing lightly outside the range of the next wave of attacks, Lucian examined the weapon, gripping its shaft. A slow, knowing smile crept onto his lips. He raised the battle axe, surrounding it with both his flames and divine light, particularly along its blade, sharpening its edge with power. Then, gripping the long handle with one hand, he lunged forward in a single step and swung. A devastating arc of fire and light slashed through the air, unleashing an unfathomable shockwave. The cursed weapons shattered into countless shards, and the magic circles that summoned them collapsed. A long groove was carved into the battlefield where the attack had landed. Blackheart stared in disbelief. A single red line appeared down his face and extended through his entire body. Then his form split in two. Both halves fell in opposite directions, spilling his innards before dissipating into a swirling purple haze. Lucian exhaled, watching the remnants of his foe vanish. "And that's why an imitation could never contend with the original," he muttered, gripping his axe. But then, cracks formed along its surface before it crumbled into dust, the remains carried away by the wind. He frowned. "No weapon can match my power. How vexing." Turning, he faced Hecate. "Make more." She blinked. "What?" "Make more cheap imitations. If they lack my might, perhaps they will make up for it in numbers, or at least they can try." Hecate crossed her arms. "Lucian, I'm supposed to be helping you reign in that arrogance. But it seems I'm only making it worse. Your hubris is growing." Lucian's golden eyes glowed. "Hubris? Arrogance?" He let out a short laugh. "Tell me, is it truly arrogance if I can back up my words with strength?" He took a step forward, his presence suffocating. "The weak can't back up their words. That is arrogance. But for those who can, that is called pride." His voice was calm, but filled with absolute certainty. "I take pride in my words because they are backed by my actions. I take pride in being chosen by the sun. I take pride in my strength, unmatched, ever-growing. I take pride in my limitless potential. And if my potential is limitless, then my pride, too, shall be limitless." His gaze bore into hers. "You tell me to rein it in, to suppress my so-called arrogance. My pride. But tell me, why should I?" His voice dropped to a whisper, but it carried the weight of a king's decree. "If I do not take pride in myself, in the blood and sweat that brought me here, then who will?" Lucian tilted his head inquisitively. "Perhaps you will? Or maybe those around me." "No. Pride is something one must realize for themselves. It can be hurt, battered, antagonized, but it cannot be given, nor can it be taken away. Pride is self-realization, an unshakable truth no one can strip from you. And I have many things in my life to be proud of, yet you seek to take that from me." Lucian chuckled as he looked at Hecate. "I wish you luck in your fruitless endeavor." He then smirked, his voice laced with amusement. "Now, Are you going to summon more of your cheap copies, or are you so entranced by the sound of my voice that you wish to hear me speak a little longer? Just so you know, we don't have all day. Hecate sighed, frowning. Why the hell do you suddenly become so philosophical when you're in that form? Sometimes I find your thought process fascinating. Other times it's absolutely infuriating. But very well, you're right, we don't have all day. With a snap of her fingers, the mist around her surged, darkening and growing more corporeal. The cratered, cracked ground began to mend itself, and from the swirling purple fog, multiple figures took shape, each identical to Lucian, down to the last detail, except for their eerie, playfully arrogant smirks. I've increased their power slightly, Hecate scoffed. They should give you more of a challenge. Lucian nodded. You have my gratitude. Hecate raised an eyebrow. You know how to say thanks? I thought your arrogance, your pride, would prevent you from such a thing. Lucian met her gaze with a serious expression. Pride does not mean I cannot show gratitude. True pride does not hinder one from expressing basic human decency. I appreciate your training, and so I acknowledge it without shame. Hecate blinked, momentarily taken aback. Then, shaking her head in amusement, she replied, You're very welcome. Are you ready? Lucian stretched out his hand to the side. The surrounding purple fog stirred and flowed toward his palm, condensing and reshaping itself. Within seconds, a battle axe of pure violet energy materialized in his grip. He swung at once, testing its weight with effortless ease, then nodded in satisfaction. This will do for now. His golden aura erupted like a volcano, waves of searing energy radiating from his body. He raised his axe, eyes gleaming with fiery determination. Come, he commanded. Become a fertilizer that held my growth. A blur of white and gold swam through the mist, swinging his axe. A brilliant white light ignited, forming a crescent blade that slashed through one of the black hearts. However, the axe shattered in Lucian's hands. In the next instant, multiple black blurs streaked past his stationary form. Pain erupted across his body as deep slashes carved through him, his blood splattering against the ground. Yet, instead of faltering, Lucian's eyes flared with golden light. The surroundings dimmed as he began absorbing the ambient light. His wounds closed instantly, his radiance intensifying. Darkness swallowed everything except for his eyes, now shining like twin stars. Lucian stepped forward, unleashing a photon beam from his gaze. At first, the beam struck the ground, carving a deep trench. Ah! Lucian roared in exhilaration, the corners of his eyes glowing bright yellow. He spun, directing the beam toward the black hearts. Some burned under its scorching power, but others twisted and evaded, their movements unervingly swift. As the attack subsided, the light around his eyes flickered before dimming. Shadows stretched unnaturally around him, and from their depths, the black hearts emerged with maddening glee, their weapons raised high. They struck, swords, spears, scythes, all embedding into Lucian's form. But his body merely shattered into radiant particles. Finally, it worked, he thought, though irritation crept in as he glanced at the fresh cuts that still managed to mark him. Lucian crossed his arms in front of him, and multiple crosses of light materialized in the air. With a flick of his hand, they blitzed forward, piercing through the battlefield. Most of the black hearts dove into their shadows or blocked the attack with weapons of darkness, but some weren't quick enough. I need to be more creative. Lucian frowned, frustration mounting. Swords, spears, glaives, and orbs of light continued to manifest around him. The black hearts retaliated, conjuring dark counterparts to his attacks. Weapons clashed midair and against the ground, triggering chain reactions of explosions. The battlefield became a storm of darkness and light, colliding in relentless chaos. Lucian shifted into a horse stance, squatting slightly as he drew his hands to his waist. Light coalesced between them, forming a blinding sphere of white and yellow, soft rainbow hues reflecting off its surface. While charging his attack, the battle raged on. Some of the black hearts, trusting in their unnatural durability, charged through the explosions. Lucian smirked arrogantly, be seared by the brilliance of the sun. With a powerful thrust, he unleashed a massive beam of light from between his palms. The sheer size of the blast dwarfed even him, pulverizing everything in its path. Sound warped under the attack's intensity as the beam carved a deep, smoldering trench into the battlefield. The black hearts caught in its path were incinerated, skin blistering, turning black, then vanishing into wisps of purple mist, which too were erased by the light. As the attack faded, the ground glowed red-hot, steam rising from the deep groove left behind. The air shimmered with heat, distorting the battlefield. Watching from a distance, Hecate observed with interest. She noted how Lucian adapted mid-battle, how his mastery of light evolved with each encounter. Her gaze shifted toward the horizon. The sun was setting. Ignoring the ongoing battle, she remained motionless as a stray attack hurtled toward her, only to dissipate against an invisible mystical barrier. Then, as the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon and night took hold, she snapped her fingers. The black hearts vanished. She turned back to Lucian, watching as his transformation unraveled. His golden hair darkened, his luminous eyes dimming to ruby red, mirroring the very creatures he had fought. The moment the transformation was undone, Lucian dropped to his knees. His breath came in ragged gasps, his body drenched in sweat. I remained shut as he struggled to regain himself. Now, Wheeze, that's what. Wheeze, I call effective training. He gasped. Hecate smirked. Deep breaths. You've been fighting for nearly 12 hours straight. You're exhausted, physically, mentally, and magically. Lucian let out a weak chuckle, still catching his breath. Lucian weakly summoned 3 potions from his shadow, 1 for each alignment, and downed them in quick succession before tossing the empty bottles aside and collapsing onto his back. Man, that's too bad. I was just getting somewhere, he muttered between heavy breaths, his eyes half closed. You were? Hecate asked, intrigued. Lucian wanted to nod, but was too exhausted to move. By constantly moving at the speed of light, I was slowly becoming light itself. I can already turn my body into pure darkness, something I've semi-mastered, and I was about to apply the same principle to light. If I could fully become pure energy, I could phase through attacks. He lifted a shaky hand, feeling his magic slowly returning. A wisp of shadow magic flickered into existence in his palm. Focusing, he attempted to alter its properties. For a brief moment, the lower part of the shadow turned lighter, almost translucent, but then it snapped back to its natural form. With a sigh, Lucian let his arm fall back to the ground, sprawled out in disappointment. You can't seriously be upset with your progress, can you? Hecate asked, giving him a deadpan look. Of course I am. I thought I'd at least make it fainter, but all I got was a flicker, he grumbled. Hecate sighed in exasperation. Lucian, what you just did would take a normal person a month to achieve. A genius? A week. You're impossible to satisfy. Satisfaction leads to complacency, Lucian said solemnly. Hecate smirked. Is your bright heart personality leaking through? Oh, gods, Lucian groaned, covering his face in embarrassment. Don't remind me. How do I say stuff like that with a straight face? Ugh. He rolled onto his side, writhing in second-hand embarrassment. After a moment, he sighed and sat up. That said, I have to admit, I kind of agree with what I said about pride. Hecate nodded with a faint smile. I agree with some of it too. Scratching his cheek, Lucian glanced at her, looking slightly sheepish. Anyway, I wanted to apologize if I was rude to you. I hope you don't take offense to anything I say in that form. Seeing the stark contrast between his usual self and his bright heart persona, Hecate couldn't help but chuckle in amusement. Don't worry, I don't take offense. Then her expression darkened slightly. But you have to stop calling me babe when you transform, or I won't be held responsible. I don't want to have to explain to your father why you suddenly ended up in his domain. I really can't control it, Lucian said, rubbing the back of his head. Then learn to, Hecate scoffed. Why is that version of you so insistent on calling me that anyway? Lucian tapped his chin, tilting his head slightly. Probably because I'm attracted to you. Hecate blinked, momentarily taken aback by his bluntness. There wasn't a hint of hesitation or shame in his voice. You're what now? She asked, barely stifling chuckle. Lucian simply shrugged as he pushed himself to his feet. You're totally my type, so it makes sense that my other self would be even less restrained in expressing it. That side of me is just more open and completely shameless. Hecate shook her head. You don't seem to have much shame either. And last I checked, you already had 2 little girlfriends trailing after you. Not to mention what you told me about the 3 fates. Lucian stretched, letting out a yawn before stepping away. So, that doesn't make my feelings for you any less real. If anything, it'd be weird if I hadn't developed anything after all the time we've spent together. He waved lazily over his shoulder. Anyway, I'm going to shower and sleep. Same time tomorrow. Hecate scoffed, waving him off. Yeah. Go, you shameless brat. Seriously, have some respect for your teacher. As he disappeared into his shadow, she shook her head. But despite herself, a small smile crept onto her lips, her eyes softening into an amused crescent. Seriously, what a naughty brat, she muttered to herself. The days of the week passed as Lucian woke up every morning, transformed by the sun, and battled himself over and over again. His mastery over light manipulation steadily grew, refining with each passing day. At first, he was limited to light weapon constructs, but as his training progressed, he expanded on the idea, pushing the limits of his imagination. When battling himself, he shaped the light into anything he could think of: chains, sharp feathers, hand-like constructs, even multiple copies of himself to fight against the army of Blackhearts that Hecate had summoned. By the end of the week, Lucian had made significant progress. On the 7th day, it was time for him to leave. Standing before Hecate, he extended his hand, revealing a pale, ghostly shadow, an impossibility. Shadows weren't meant to be white, yet his was faint and pulsing with a strange aura. Although I couldn't fully convert it into light, this is the best I could manage, Lucian admitted. I'm at a threshold. Once I break past it, I should be able to fully transform my darkness into light. Hecate studied the pale shadow and nodded, impressed. I have to say, you never cease to amaze me. You've accomplished a lot in just a week. She reached out and patted Lucian on the head. Lucian stiffened, feeling his face grow warm. Embarrassed, he thought, this is why I'm so weak to falling in love. Yeah, anyway, thanks for all your help, he muttered, swatting her hand away. Hecate smirked. Of course. I did agree to be your teacher, after all. Feel free to come back if there's anything else you want to learn. You're quite a fun student. Her smirk widened. Plus, I get to hit you whenever I please. What greater joy is there? Lucian's expression flattened. I'm leaving. Hecate chuckled. I'm joking. Whatever. Shaking his head, Lucian turned toward the door. I might drop by later this summer for help with curses. Be sure to let me know when, she replied as Lucian placed 2 fingers in his mouth and let out a sharp whistle. His shadow expanded beneath him, and moments later, the sound of powerful hooves echoed through the air. A dark stallion galloped forward, its shadowy mane flowing like liquid night. The creature snorted and pranced around Lucian. He grabbed the reins and soothed the beast with a gentle pat. Whoa, sorry I haven't taken you out much. I just didn't get the chance before. The stallion, Sebastian, nudged Lucian's hand in response. Lucian grinned before pulling himself up onto the horse's back. As he did, darkness coiled around his hand, solidifying into a cowboy hat. He placed it on his head with a playful tilt. I'll be seeing you, missy, he drawled in a southern accent, winking at Hecate before making a few kissing noises and lightly tapping Sebastian's side. Hecate sighed, exasperated as she watched him ride away. Lucian smirked, tipping his hat lower. Just you and me, buddy. Us against the world, riding through the green meadows. Sebastian galloped faster, his dark mane billowing behind him like a shadow against the wind. Lucian ran a hand down the stallion's neck. We better hurry, bud. Annabeth will kill us if we're late for her birthday. As if understanding, the stallion neighed and picked up speed. Lucian grinned, letting the wind rush past him, feeling the freedom of the open ride. He closed his eyes and savored the moment. Lucian arrived at the top of the hill, overlooking Camp Half-Blood. Sebastian slowed his pace, trotting carefully down toward the entrance. Sliding off his horse, Lucian patted his companion's side. "Thanks, bud. I'll get you some food later." With a final stroke of Sebastian's mane, he dismissed him back into his shadow. His cowboy hat dissolved into wisps of darkness as he walked into camp, hands stuffed in his pockets. He raised an eyebrow as he sensed 3 distinct energy signatures approaching at high speed. A streak of lightning skidded to a stop in front of him, wind kicking up dust as Talia landed. A shifting shadow raced across the ground before rising to reveal Nox, with Annabeth clinging to his back. She quickly jumped down. At the same time, Percy came sprinting toward them. Lucian barely spared Talia and Percy a glance before stretching his arms wide and scooping Annabeth into the air, spinning her around. "Happy birthday!" Annabeth let out a short laugh. "Haha, thanks." But something was off. There was no joy in her expression, only wariness. Lucian's smile faded as he looked between her, Talia, and Percy. Their grim faces sent a chill down his spine. He gently set Annabeth down and met her eyes, his voice turning cold. "What's wrong? Who died? What?" Percy exclaimed in surprise. "No one died. Why would you think that? Then why's the atmosphere so damn heavy?" Lucian asked, raising an eyebrow. Talia hesitated before answering. It's Nico and Bianca." Lucian's faint smile disappeared entirely, his eyes turning cold. "What about them?" Closing his eyes, he spread his senses throughout the entire camp. When he found nothing, his voice dropped to a dangerous tone. "Tell me they're in the basement, which is why I can't detect them." His eyes began to glow ominously. No one met his gaze. Talia and Percy looked away, their hands clenching at their sides. Annabeth swallowed hard before speaking. "It was Lord Hermes. He came on Zeus' orders and took them." Talia added grimly. "They're being put on trial for being forbidden children." Lucian's breath hitched, his entire body tensing. "What?" he snarled as canines bared. His teeth ground together audibly, and a suffocating aura of black and red energy seeped from his skin, saturating the air. The atmosphere darkened. A massive, stretched-out skull of black mist materialized behind him, its hollow eye sockets glowing red. The pressure slammed into them like a tidal wave. Annabeth, Talia, and Percy gripped their chests, their breath coming in short gasps. Sweat dripped down their temples. The weight of Lucian's fury bore down on the entire camp. Campers collapsed to their knees in terror. Animals screeched and wailed, their cries echoing through the forest. Dryads huddled together, trembling as if the apocalypse had arrived. Lucian took a slow step forward, towering over Talia. "What the hell do you mean? They're being put on trial?" Talia's head lowered instinctively, her body shaking. "Holy shit. Holy shit. Holy fucking shit. I've never seen him this angry before." Lucian's voice dropped to an icy whisper. "Why? They were born before the pact was made. They don't fall under the category of forbidden children." Talia clenched her fists, forcing herself to answer. "T tried telling that to my father. He doesn't care." She hesitantly lifted her head, only to regret it instantly. She dropped her gaze again. "Nope." Gritting her teeth, she continued. "Percy tried to stop Lord Hermes, but it was no use. I had to hold him back before things escalated. They left not too long ago." "Lucian, that's enough." Chiron approached, his hooves unsteady. His instincts, honed over millennia of survival, screamed at him to flee. He carried his bow, though his trembling hands betrayed his fear. Lucian turned to him slowly, his glowing red eyes locking onto the centaur. Chiron's instincts forced him to avert his gaze immediately. I can guess why you're angry. You can guess." Lucian's voice dripped with venom. He opened his mouth to say more, but stopped himself, exhaling sharply. "I won't waste my breath on you. I have more important things to deal with." Raising his hand, his dread presence still active, Lucian summoned his crystal ball from his ring. "Call my mother." The call connected instantly. Medea's image flickered into view, one eyebrow raised. She didn't need to ask what was wrong. She could feel the raw fury radiating from him. "Don't worry," she said calmly. "Your father is already handling it." Lucian nodded. "Good. Tell him I'm coming." He cut the call and turned to leave. Stopping briefly, he spoke without looking back. "Sorry your birthday turned out like this." The shadows surged around him, swallowing him whole. As soon as he vanished, Percy collapsed backward onto the ground, still trembling. Why the hell was that scarier than facing Ares? Lucian moved swiftly through the shadows, effortlessly weaving through the darkness. Hands suddenly emerged from the void, grasping at him. Demons and other shadow-dwelling apparitions attempting to seize him. Demons were no different from demons. They were spirits born from forces of nature and abstract concepts. Children of Hades were often warned not to linger in the shadows for too long, lest they be attacked and dragged away by the beings that dwelled there, or worse, by deities who held dominion over darkness. Annabeth's artificial spirit, Nox, could also be considered a demon, as it was born from the very concept of darkness and shadows. Normally, when Lucian traveled through the shadows, he was a master of concealment, nearly undetectable even to the entities that resided there. His natural affinity for darkness made him a ghost among ghosts, invisible even to those who shared his domain. But right now, stealth was the last thing on his mind. His dread presence pulsed through the void, not as a cloak of concealment, but as a beacon, drawing the creatures of the abyss toward him. Lucian abruptly halted, stepping back just in time to see a sharp claw slash through the space where he had stood. His glowing red eyes locked onto the figure before him, a woman cloaked in shadow with massive, dark wings. Though she possessed an eerie beauty, her mouth bristled with protruding fangs, and her clawed feet barely touched the darkness beneath her. A blood-stained tunic draped over her form. Carice, demons of violent death and disease. Lucian recognized them instantly. Another claw lashed toward him from behind. Without turning, Lucian tilted his head just enough for the attack to miss. Then, with a swift motion, he seized the extended limb and hurled its owner toward the first Carice. And they usually travel in groups. How troublesome. Lucian let his dread presence expand, his voice cold as he spoke. "Move. I'm not in the mood. If one more of you interferes, I'll slaughter you all." The demons of violent death were unfazed. If anything, his power only seemed to excite them. "This little brother is feeling murderous," one of the Carice purred, her sharp grin widening. The other licked her fangs hungrily, her mouth watering. "Maybe we should let him go and follow him instead. He might lead us to a feast." Lucian's eyes glowed brighter for a moment before dimming as he shut them. "I warned you both." Tink, tink. Two more claws emerged from the darkness, one aiming for his neck, the other for his side. Before they could land, a black suit of armor materialized over his body. Sparks flew as the deadly claws scraped against the impenetrable metal. Lucian's eyes snapped open, now encased behind helmet. A red cape unfurled behind him as he repeated, "I warned you all." In a flash, Lucian seized the arms of the Carice on either side of him. With a powerful yank, he tore their limbs from their bodies. Blood burst into the darkness as the Carice let out blood-curdling shrieks, their now empty shoulders gushing. They flapped their wings desperately, retreating from him. The sky of shadows churned as more Carice gathered, circling like vultures over a fresh kill. Lucian extended his hand. His scythe materialized in his grasp. The Carice moved unnaturally fast, darting through the darkness in erratic patterns. Even with his enhanced sight, they were difficult to track. But Lucian didn't need to follow where they were. He needed to predict where they were going. He surged through the void, appearing above one of the armless Carice before she even realized he was there. With a single, brutal swing, his scythe cleaved through her neck. Lucian barely hesitated. The scythe morphed into a spear in his grip, and with all his strength, he hurled it toward the second armless Carice. A shockwave exploded from the impact as the spear punctured through her chest, carving a gaping, see-through hole. Both Carice disintegrated into golden dust, their shrieks fading into the abyss. Lucian controlled the spear through his blood connection, making it change course mid-flight toward the remaining Carice. However, the others were prepared. They darted through the darkness, narrowly avoiding the blitzing weapon. With a flick of his wrist, the spear twirled back into his grasp. Clicking his tongue in irritation, Lucian noticed even more Carice emerging from the shadows. Azura, Galurk, slaughter them. His spear shifted seamlessly into a beautifully crafted longsword as two towering figures materialized beside him. One was a six-armed, three-headed demon cloaked in darkness, its muscular frame exuding pure menace. Azura. The other, a massive black rock golem with glowing red eyes, Galurk. Without hesitation, they surged into battle. A Carice lunged at Azura, her claws slicing through his chest, hoping to infect him with a death-inducing disease. But nothing happened. Azura wasn't alive in the conventional sense. He couldn't be poisoned, sickened, or afflicted. Grinning madly, all three of his faces twisted in amusement. With one hand, he grabbed the Carice by her torso. Two more clutched her arms, two gripped her legs, and the final one clamped around her head. Then, with a mighty pull, he tore her apart. Blood sprayed across the void. Azura's laughter boomed as he charged his next victim, tearing out her wings before twisting her neck with a sickening crack. Galurk, meanwhile, crushed two Carice between his massive hands, blood seeping through his rocky fingers. More Carice swarmed him, slashing at his body, but his wounds healed instantly. With slow, methodical movements, he swatted them from the air like insects. Lucian, ever the apex predator, danced through the shadows, his blade carving through any demon foolish enough to get too close. Severed limbs and golden dust filled the air, a storm of carnage in his wake. Dark energy coiled around his sword as he spun, unleashing a violent tempest of black crescents that cut through the swarm like an unavoidable death sentence. When the slaughter ended, only one remained, the first Carice who had attacked him. He had left her alive on purpose. Lucian's glowing red eyes bored into her soul through the visor of his helmet. She trembled, her body racked with shivers as she was forced to relive her worst fears. "Demon," she stammered, staring at the corpses of her fallen sisters. "You're a demon. Our night mother won't forgive." Lucian's hand shot out, clamping over her mouth. He pulled her closer, his gaze burning into her. She squeezed her eyes shut, tried to escape his paralyzing presence. "I warned you not to stand in my way," he said coldly. "You failed to heed my words, and as such you paid the price. You want to blame someone, blame your lack of foresight." His grip tightened. Her head exploded in his grasp, sending blood and brain matter splattering against his black armor. Without a second thought, he tossed the lifeless body aside. "Azura, Galurk, return." Azura flexed his muscles, grinning ear to ear, while Galurk bowed respectfully before vanishing into the darkness. Chomper absorb. A mimic chest materialized in the void, its gaping maw opening wide. A powerful suction force pulled the spoils of war into the mimic's compartment for safekeeping. Once it was done, Lucian dismissed it with a wave of his hand. "Arise." Immediately, 23 new connections formed. Black and red shadow figures emerged, each possessing dark raven wings. They knelt before Lucian in unwavering obedience. With a thought, he absorbed them into his shadow. Clicking his tongue, he exhaled sharply. "I've wasted enough time." Yet, despite his annoyance, this battle had been useful. It had allowed him to calm down, to think. He couldn't afford to let his killing intent toward the gods be so obvious. Even if he wanted nothing more than to slaughter some of them, he had to be patient. How pathetic. His lips curled in disgust. "I hate feeling this weak." His presence disappeared into the darkness, allowing him to travel undetected to his true destination, the Empire State Building. From a nearby alley, a dark-armored knight emerged. Blood and viscera dripped from his blackened form as he carried his long blade at his side. The cursed knight's gaze lifted to the towering skyscraper before shifting forward. Without hesitation, he stepped out of the shadows, forming a sheath of darkness at his waist to secure his sword. It was time. Lucian placed a hand over his chest and cast a curse upon himself. A curse of imperceptibility, making him nearly impossible to detect or acknowledge. A curse can be both an inconvenience and an advantage when used correctly, he thought, relying on his knowledge of curses to see if he could digest his potion faster. Despite his efforts, he still didn't feel the potion digesting in his system. He shook his head in frustration before taking a step forward and vanished into a wisp of darkness. He reappeared across the street and entered the Empire State Building undetected. Moving swiftly, he reached the elevator, his gaze locking onto the keyhole once inside. Darkness seeped from his fingertips as they pressed against the opening, molding into the shape of a key. With a subtle twist, the mechanism clicked and the locked buttons were revealed. Without hesitation, he pressed the button for the highest floor and leaned back against the elevator wall, arms crossed over his chest, legs casually apart. He looked imposing, especially in his blood-stained suit of armor. His fingers drummed lightly against his bicep as he watched the numbers ascend. The only part of his face visible was a single glowing red eye, peering through the shadows. Realizing there was no need for concealment anymore, Lucian undid the curse. Even with his magic, deceiving a god's senses at close range was nearly impossible. The elevator doors slid open. Lucian stepped forward without hesitation, his mind devoid of unnecessary thoughts. He walked with calm confidence, his crimson cape billowing behind him. He ignored the startled gazes of the spirits and demons inhabiting Olympus. Their opinions meant nothing to him. However, what did surprise him was the familiar figure ascending the steps ahead of him toward the council chamber. The figure paused, then turned. It was Hades, and he looked anything but pleased. Veins bulged along his forehead and arms, his presence exuding an unapproachable, fearsome aura. His back hunched slightly, hands in his pockets, before he leaned back and muttered in confusion. "Lucian, Father." Hades' sharp gaze swept over him, taking in the blood covering his armor. His expression darkened. "Why are you covered in blood?" Lucian shrugged. "A few demons got in my way. What slowed you down? Shouldn't you already be inside?" Hades let out a sigh. "You fail to grasp just how much time has passed between the events that occurred. Not to mention, I don't have the same freedom to teleport here as naturally as you do." Lucian raised an eyebrow. Hades shook his head, exasperated. "Lucian, go back. I'll handle this. There was no need for you to come. You're only going to make things worse." No. Lucian scoffed. "I don't care. I want to see if Nico and Bianca are all right. And don't bother trying to convince me otherwise. You know how stubborn I am." Hades pinched the bridge of his nose. "First off, of course they're all right. Hermes would be a fool to allow anything to happen to them, or to treat them roughly. He knows full well what awaits in my kingdom if he does. And as much of an idiot as my brother appears to be, he is no fool." Lucian eyed him skeptically at that last part, and even Hades himself looked unsure before shaking his head. "Fine, come along." As they ascended the final steps, Hermes stood at the chamber entrance. The messenger god glanced at Hades apologetically, but ignored Lucian entirely. "You know I can't disobey Father's orders," Hermes said. Hades' expression remained impassive. "Save your excuses for someone who cares to hear them. I'm not that person. Announce our presence, or I'll do it myself." Hermes stiffened. Then, clearing his throat, he proclaimed loudly, "Now entering, Hades, god of the dead, lord of the underworld." The golden doors opened, and Hermes continued. Accompanying him, Lucian Blackheart of the House of Hades, prince of the underworld. Hades waved a hand, and a green flame engulfed Lucian, burning away the blood and gore from his armor, leaving it pristine. Lucian blinked in mild surprise that he got called by his official title, but took it in stride. As the last flickers of green flame died out, he strode forward, his polished black armor gleaming, an image of a knight stepping into battle. Inside, Hermes ascended to his throne, the small wings on his feet making soft, fluttering noises. Lucian's eyes scanned the room. Bianca trembled with fear. Nico, though unable to feel fear, still looked deeply concerned. Their distress was palpable. But the moment they saw Hades and Lucian enter, their faces lit up with relief. Lucian, Dad! Lucian barely spared Zeus a glance. Normally, he'd at least offer the bare minimum of respect, reluctantly. But right now, he simply didn't care. Crossing the room, he crouched to Bianca and Nico's level. Are you two all right? You're not hurt, are you? Bianca quickly shook her head. No, we're okay. Nico frowned. What happens now? Lucian exhaled, his red eye gleaming as he slowly looked up at the 11 gods seated before him. One was missing. Hera looked at Lucian with disdain. You grow more arrogant by the second, boy. When one enters this hall, they show respect to their superiors. Just because you're accompanied by your father does not excuse you from this custom. Lucian raised his head, his single visible red eye glowing ominously beneath his helm. You want my respect? Then earn it. A collective gasp filled the room. The sheer audacity of his words left even the gods stunned. Hades, control your bastard. Zeus began arrogantly, but Hades snorted in amusement. It is you who needs to learn control, brother, Hades said with an air of disdain. Do not mistake my lack of action for my inability to do so. Zeus stood abruptly, lightning crackling around his clenched fist. Is that a threat? Yes, it is, Hades answered without hesitation, his voice sharp as a blade. You've played with fire for so long that you've forgotten its danger. His glare darkened. Even gods have limits. And I have reached mine with how many times I've been summoned before the winter solstice, only to look at your insufferable face. I think that's enough, Poseidon interjected, rising from his throne. But Hades and Zeus turned their fury on him at the same time. You stay out of this. It does not concern you. Poseidon froze, his mouth opening slightly before he awkwardly settled back onto his throne. Aphrodite chuckled behind her hand, enjoying the spectacle. Zeus's scowl deepened. Perhaps if you raise your bastards properly, I wouldn't have to call you out of your dark hole, Hades. His voice boomed with authority. That one, he motioned toward Lucian, is constantly causing trouble, showing blatant disrespect. And now I see he gets it from his father. His grip on his bolt tightened. I will not have your unruly brats running unchecked. If I tolerate such disrespect, others will think it acceptable. Allowing such insolence is a show of weakness, and weakness invites rebellion. His thunderous eyes crackled as he leaned forward. We cannot afford rebellion. You, of all people, should know what's at stake. Hades scoffed, shaking his head. Spare me your self-righteousness. Don't think I don't see how that mind of yours works, brother. You're still in denial. The only way you'll ever accept the truth is if he appears before you himself. His expression twisted into something almost deranged. Don't you dare use him in your schemes. This isn't about him. This is about you and me. You despise me so much that you took Maria from me. His voice dropped into a growl. And I will not let you take the last memento I have of her. Suddenly, Nico and Bianca flinched, clutching their heads in pain. Memories flooded their minds. The roar of thunder, the crackle of lightning, the echo of their father's desperate cries, the warm smile of a woman, one last, fleeting moment before it was all ripped away. The vision lasted only a second before fading, leaving them gasping. What was that? Nico asked through gritted teeth, his eyes wet with unshed tears. Bianca swallowed hard, her own eyes shimmering. You saw it too, didn't you? Lucian's gaze softened. He said nothing, simply pulling them into his arms, shielding them from everything around them. Artemis, watching from her throne, felt a rare pang of understanding. Of all those present, she could relate to Lucian the most. As the older sister of Apollo, she understood that fierce, desperate desire to protect their sibling from the world, which caused her heart to throb at the scene in front of her of Lucian embracing them. Aphrodite watched from her throne in amusement. Wow, I am loving every second of this. Should I dip my hands into this? Bring them closer? The chaos that would ensue would be the most fun to watch. Hades, if I were you, I would think carefully about what you say, Zeus said in a cold tone, his eyes flashing with warning. You seem to have forgotten just who you were speaking to. I will not be spoken to like that in my own kingdom. Lightning crackled and danced across his skin, his eyes glowing in intense blue, pulsing with electricity and raw power. Thunder roared above them, shaking the skies, while a powerful gale swept over everyone. Zeus continued, "You like to wield your seniority as if it grants you power, yet you have done nothing but disgrace yourself. You have shamed the name of the gods, clinging to that dead mortal woman like a child refusing to let go of his toy." Standing tall, his posture radiating authority, Zeus looked down at Hades with open disdain. "You defied me once for that woman. I allowed it because I understood grief makes one weak, irrational, but I will not allow it a second time. For the survival and betterment of Olympus, those two will stand trial, and you will do nothing but comply." His voice grew sharper. One of them could be the child of prophecy, a threat to us all. A danger to the gods cannot be ignored. I will not allow it. So I will tell you this once, Hades, stand down. You won't get another warning. The shadows around Hades thickened, swallowing the light as his presence darkened the very air. His face was obscured, black as night, save for his glowing eyes, burning with an unnatural, menacing light. A suffocating pressure radiated from his body, warping the space around him, plunging the surroundings into perpetual darkness. Then, in a voice thick with restrained fury, Hades spoke. Lucian, his son stiffened, instinctively recognizing the weight behind his father's words. This was rage unlike any other, and Lucian respected how much restraint Hades was showing. Cover their eyes. Close your own. Lucian acted immediately, shielding Bianca's and Nico's eyes with his hands while shutting his own tightly. Do not open them, no matter what. His voice left no room for argument. Nico and Bianca, sensing the danger, obeyed without hesitation. The darkness surrounding Hades deepened, thickening like a living void. Then it shifted, glowing with an eerie, unsettling energy. His form grew larger, expanding with power beyond mortal comprehension. Zeus's expression twisted with fury. Hades, he roared, his body exploding with divine radiance. Blinding light engulfed him, crackling with raw, unrestrained electricity. The sheer force of his presence sent shock waves through the air, rupturing Lucian's eardrums despite his best efforts to shield himself. He gritted his teeth, using his own darkness to block the sound for Nico and Bianca, though they still trembled under its force. The two gods had unveiled their divine forms. Hades was an entity of pure darkness, a towering specter of shadow and flame. His presence devoured the light, casting an oppressive void around him. He stood taller than a mountain, a crown of horns and bones circling his head, his body featureless save for his burning, hollow eyes. The flames that wreathed him were not ordinary fire, but the infernal essence of the underworld itself. Zeus, in contrast, was the embodiment of sky and storm. His form was sculpted from pure lightning, crackling with boundless energy. His body pulsed with the concept of absolute power and authority, as though he was the sky itself. His beard, formed from swirling clouds, gave him the presence of an omnipotent force. He radiated divinity in its purest, most terrifying form. Hades growled, his voice deep and distorted, carrying the weight of millennia. Do you think I fear war, brother? The sound alone was enough to instill terror, even without his helm of darkness. His power twisted the air with the raw essence of fear itself. His eyes burned brighter as he stepped forward. Let's see who has more to lose in this war. You or me? For once, your paranoia is justified. You've always feared that I would rise against you, which is why you've spent eons suppressing me. Well, here I am. Your fears have come true. Then, in a voice almost taunting, he added, You have a talent for making self-fulfilling prophecies. Zeus's fury ignited, his form flaring brighter, his power teetering on the edge of destruction, until another voice cut through the chaos. "That's enough, both of you." The storm and darkness recoiled as a third divine presence surged forward. The sea itself rose, coalescing into a towering figure of undeniable authority. Poseidon had entered the fray. His divine form was a paradox, calm yet violent, tranquil yet unyielding. His body was composed of swirling, turbulent waters, shifting between the serenity of still seas and the devastation of raging tempests. His power rivaled both his brothers, emanating a force that demanded respect. Hades narrowed his eyes. "I told you this does not concern you." Poseidon stepped forward, his voice steady. "Normally, I wouldn't involve myself in your petty squabbles, but I cannot allow the two of you to destroy each other, not now." He pressed his hands against both their chests, pushing them apart with undeniable force. Turning first to Zeus, Poseidon's gaze was sharp. "Must you antagonize Hades at every opportunity? No one here wants war, least of all me. We still haven't even held the trial, and you speak as if those two are already sentenced to death." Then his gaze shifted to Hades. "I understand your anger, brother. More than anyone, I understand. But you must remember what's at stake. If we fight among ourselves, we weaken Olympus. We make ourselves vulnerable. And that is exactly what he wants." The tension between the three brothers crackled like a storm on the brink of chaos. "Do not order me around, Poseidon," Zeus said angrily. "I have been lenient enough with this ungrateful brother of mine. He needs to learn that he cannot act as he pleases." "Your efforts are pointless, brother," Hades said coldly, directing his words toward Poseidon. "You see how he behaves. I've tolerated his actions because I didn't care to deal with him, but it seems he's forgotten that I am not someone to be trifled with. He needs to be taught humility." Poseidon sighed heavily. "You're both acting like children." Before he could continue, a new voice joined the conversation, cutting through the tension like ice. It was cold, devoid of emotion. "It is the three of you who need to stop." Silence fell. Every god in the throne room widened their eyes in disbelief, even those who had been silently observing from their seats. No one could believe what they had just heard. All eyes turned toward the small child standing by the hearth, her gaze locked onto the three gods, while they stared in astonishment. Hestia had spoken. Normally, she quietly tended the hearth, away from the thrones, during meetings like these. She never involved herself in the squabbles of the gods, content to simply watch over the flames with a peaceful smile. Even when her family gathered during the winter solstice, she remained apart from their conflicts. But now, for the first time, Hestia had spoken up with a frown on her face. Her eyes glowed a deep, burning red as she looked at her three younger brothers with a cold, unblinking stare. They froze. Sweat beaded on their brows. Hestia," Poseidon called out hesitantly, his voice tinged with unease. Even the other gods shifted uncomfortably in their seats, worried that her piercing gaze might turn on them next. "In case you've forgotten," Hestia said, her voice as cold as the void, "there are mortals present. When three gods unleash their divine forms at once, the sheer force of it is enough to kill someone." She tilted her head, subtly directing their gazes. Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades turned and froze in shock. They had been so caught up in their argument that they had forgotten about the three demigods standing nearby. But that wasn't why they were stunned. Lucian's armor was cracked and scorched under the weight of their divine might. He was leaning over Bianca and Nico, shielding them with his body from the oppressive force of their presence. His helmet was shattered, and most of his armor had crumbled away. Blood streamed from his ears, his closed eyes, his nostrils, and his mouth. His skin was drenched in red, the sheer pressure making his very pores bleed. And yet, despite the horrific sight, Lucian's expression remained eerily composed. His eyes stayed shut, his face emotionless, as if he were merely taking a nap. Hestia's voice rang out again, just as frigid as before. "Know this, I'm very fond of that boy. If anything happens to him, I will be very upset." She arched a single brow at her three younger brothers. "Well," Poseidon and Hades immediately shrank back, dispelling their divine forms and returning to their mortal guises. Only Zeus remained unchanged. Zeus! Hestia's voice turned even colder. Hades and Poseidon flinched. Then, realizing Zeus wasn't moving, they turned on him with alarm. Change back! Change back! Hades urged in a near panic. What are you doing? Hurry up! Poseidon snapped through gritted teeth. Now is not the time to act tough. If we suffer because of you, I will never forgive you. Hestia didn't say another word. Instead, she slowly raised 3 fingers. And then she lowered one. Zeus tensed, immediately shrinking back and awkwardly averting his gaze. He could still feel her burning stare boring into the side of his head. Sorry, he muttered. Hestia scoffed before turning her gaze toward Lucian. Her frown softened into a gentle smile, her eyes filled with warmth and familial affection. Lucian, honey, are you okay? Lucian weakly raised a thumbs up. You worried about me, auntie? As he spoke, a fresh cascade of blood poured from his mouth, splattering onto the ground between Nico and Bianca. Both shuddered at the sight. Lucian then cracked open one eye, almost like he was winking, and smiled, his teeth stained crimson. Don't be. The divine might of 3 gods? Is that what that was? He grinned wider, his voice hoarse but teasing. I barely even noticed. Hestia chuckled. What a terrible liar you are. You shouldn't lie to your aunt, you know. Lucian let out a raspy, exaggerated gasp. Me? Lying to you? My poor heart couldn't take it. The guilt would eat me alive. They both chuckled. The other gods, still reeling from what they had witnessed, could only stare in bewilderment. What exactly had they just seen? Hades walked back toward Lucian's bloody form and placed a hand on his head. Darkness enveloped Lucian in a comforting embrace, healing the wounds scattered across his body. His breathing, once hoarse and labored, eased into a steadier rhythm. Hades sighed, giving Lucian an apologetic look. Thanks for looking after them, he said, patting his head. Lucian swatted his hand away and used his magic to clean himself. Shadows engulfed his body in a swirling black silhouette, and when they withdrew, he stood in normal clothing, having dismissed his battered armor. Let's just get this over with. I have more important things to do today. Hades scoffed in amusement, but nodded in agreement. He cast a glance toward Nico and Bianca, ensuring they were unharmed, before turning back to face the throne. Zeus, Hades called out coldly. The last thing he wanted was to acknowledge him as his brother. What? Zeus snarled, clearly in a foul mood. Being reprimanded by their eldest sister had done nothing to improve his temperament. I propose a trade, Hades said, slipping his hands into his pockets. Zeus sneered. You have nothing I want. What exactly do you think you can offer me? Hades' grin widened. I'm so glad you asked. You will drop this matter concerning Nico and Bianca. You will not antagonize them, set your sights on them, or attempt to harm them, directly or indirectly. That includes tricks, tactics, and, most importantly, using your wife to do your dirty work. Hades' tone was firm, ensuring no loophole remained. Zeus scoffed and walked back to his throne, lounging lazily against his fist. And in return, he asked, clearly uninterested, already deciding he had no intention of agreeing. Hades' grin remained, but the shadows beneath him suddenly expanded, staining the golden floor of Olympus a pitch-black void. It was as if an abyss had opened beneath him. With a flick of his wrist, the sound of rattling chains echoed through the hall. A thick black chain shot from the darkness, wrapping around Hades' palm and snaking up his arm. He yanked the chain. A low grunt of pain followed as a figure was dragged out of the void and thrown onto the floor. Lucian barely restrained his laughter when he saw who it was. Ares. The war god lay sprawled on the ground, groaning in agony. His short black hair was matted with sweat, his bulky frame covered in numerous bite marks. His body was drenched in saliva, and his sunken eyes trembled with a lifeless, haunted expression. He shook violently, looking like a man who had glimpsed true hell and survived only to regret it. Zeus' relaxed demeanor vanished instantly, his cold gaze settling on the disgrace before him. He tried to appear indifferent, But the veins on his temple and his iron grip on his throne betrayed his barely contained rage. And in return, Hades said smoothly, tugging Ares' chain and pushing him forward, "I could give you back this miscreant." Zeus sneered. "And what makes you think we—" "We accept the deal," Hera interrupted, her voice cold and resolute. "What?" Zeus snapped his head toward her. "Zeus, he's our son," Hera said, her gaze flickering toward Ares, lingering momentarily. "Yes, he needs to be punished, but that punishment must come from us. Hades has no right to keep him." Lucian watched the exchange with hidden amusement. Interesting. So Hera truly cares for her son. That could be useful later. Zeus scoffed. "Honestly, I wouldn't mind if Hades kept him a while longer. It's not as if he's missed here." Ares' eyes widened in terror. Panic overtook him as he scrambled forward, his voice breaking. "No, Father, please. I beg you. Don't send me back down there. Please don't send me back to that monster. Am I not your son? Please, Father." The room fell into an eerie silence as everyone watched the war god's pathetic display. Tears and snot streamed down his face as he knelt before Zeus, trembling in desperation. Zeus looked at him with pure disgust. He wasn't alone. Aphrodite shared the same expression, while Hera's gaze held a rare flicker of pity. Hephaestus, however, looked gleeful, clearly enjoying the humiliation. The rest of the gods wore either amused or indifferent expressions. Ares, once a mighty war god, now lay broken before them all. Flash. Everyone turned toward the sudden flash of light to see Lucian holding his phone in front of his face, camera aimed directly at Ares. Lucian glanced down at his screen, completely unfazed, and muttered as his fingers moved rapidly across it. "I'm so sending this to the group chat. Status update. Laughing my ass off, and send." With that, he shut his phone and looked back up to see everyone staring at him. He waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, don't mind me. Carry on." Hades stifled a laugh, but he wasn't the only one. Hephaestus was roaring with laughter, while even Aphrodite, despite herself, hid her mouth behind her hand, chuckling. Apollo and Artemis also smirked in amusement. Hera, on the other hand, was glaring daggers at Lucian before turning her fury toward Zeus, who merely looked indifferent. "Well, aren't you going to say anything?" she demanded, a mix of anger and curiosity in her voice. Zeus shrugged. "He deserves to be humiliated." Hera's brow twitched violently. Hades shook his head with a suppressed smile before turning to Zeus, raising an eyebrow. "Well," he then smirked tauntingly, "I'm offering you a lifetime deal here. 1 full god for 2 demigods. That sounds like a reasonable exchange, wouldn't you say?" Zeus studied Ares with a thoughtful expression before turning to Athena. "You've been quiet when you'd normally have something to say. What's your opinion on this exchange?" Athena closed her eyes briefly before responding. Although he clearly wasn't missed, he is still part of the council. He has some importance, so I'd say the exchange is reasonable. More importantly, we can't afford a war with Lord Hades, especially when he's willing to meet us halfway. We lose nothing and gain a god back. She paused. We also have to consider how the original trial would have gone. In all honesty, they would have likely won, making this entire thing a waste of time. However, that changes now with Ares' return. Zeus nodded, considering her words. He then looked around. Who agrees to the exchange? One by one, the gods raised their hands. Even Hephaestus, though clearly not for Ares' sake, but rather in favor of Hades and Lucian. A consensus was reached. "Very well," Zeus said, his voice heavy with reluctant acceptance. "We agree to the terms of the exchange. In return for Ares, we will not pursue your children. However, should they ever pose a threat to Olympus or turn against us, I will have no choice but to act." His eyes narrowed slightly as he emphasized the last part. Hades and Zeus locked gazes. After a brief pause, Hades nodded. "I suppose that's fair. I'll serve as the intermediary for this deal. Now, shake hands to seal the agreement," Poseidon announced, stepping between them. From his throne, Zeus extended his hand. Hades did the same. As their hands met in the middle, Poseidon placed his own over them and declared, "With this, the deal is complete." A collective sigh of relief escaped from Nico and Bianca. Lucian turned toward Hestia and lowered his head in gratitude. She merely winked before returning to tend to the hearth. Just then, a voice echoed in Lucian's mind. He kept his expression neutral, showing no outward reaction. "Little brother, meet me at the nearby park when this is over. I want to talk to you alone." Lucian had to stop himself from visibly shuddering at Aphrodite's voice inside his head. He considered his options for a moment before opening his mouth, preparing to inform his father. However, as if anticipating his move, Aphrodite's voice rang out again. "If you mention anything, I'll tell Zeus about the little secret you have with Artemis, maybe even throw in a white lie and say you're aiming for all 3 virgin goddesses." Lucian turned to Aphrodite, who was smirking triumphantly down at him. Lucian simply smiled back. Aphrodite's smug expression faltered. Before she could react, Lucian screamed directly through the mental link she had formed. Aphrodite jolted in shock, drawing confused stares from the other gods as she quickly looked down, clutching her head in both discomfort and embarrassment, her face flushing as she tried to compose herself. Hades glanced at Nico, Bianca, and Lucian before saying, "Let's go." However, Lucian remained where he was, his gaze locked onto a certain goddess. "Lucian," Hades called out. Lucian didn't respond immediately. Instead, Athena noticed his stare and arched an eyebrow. "What?" she asked. "Aren't you going to say anything?" Lucian asked, confused. "About what exactly?" Athena responded, tilting her head slightly. Lucian rolled his eyes. "It's Annabeth's birthday today. Don't you want me to give her a message or something? She might not show it, but I know her well enough to say she'd appreciate it a lot." Unexpectedly, Athena chuckled. The reaction caught most of them off guard, including Lucian. Shaking her head, Athena said, "Worry not. I have already sent her my regards. I appreciate you looking after her, even if I disapprove of you." Lucian scoffed. "All right, that last part was unnecessary, mother-in-law." He gave her a slight bow, offering the bare minimum of respect. "Now, if you'll excuse me." Athena rolled her eyes at his remark, while Artemis's eyebrows furrowed slightly. Aphrodite, noticing the small frown forming on Artemis's lips, inwardly cheered. "Oh, the drama. She's upset that Lucian called Athena mother-in-law, but she doesn't even know why it bothers her. Ugh, I live for these moments. They're the best." Lucian, oblivious to any of this, finally turned and followed Hades and his 2 siblings. As they exited the throne room and descended the steps, Hades turned to Nico and Bianca. "I have a present waiting for both of you downstairs." "You do?" Bianca asked in surprise. "When you say downstairs, do you mean the underworld downstairs or outside the building downstairs?" Nico asked skeptically. "Outside the building downstairs," Hades clarified. "What about me? Did you get me a present?" Lucian teased. Hades scoffed. "I didn't even know you'd be here." He then looked at Lucian more seriously. "You could invite Annabeth and your friends. We could throw her a birthday party in the underworld." "You'd seriously do that?" Lucian asked, raising an eyebrow. Hades shrugged. His expression softened as he gazed into the distance, lost in thought. "The underworld, it gets lonely without Persephone. And all your mother talks about is you, so I wouldn't mind the extra company. I'm sure she'd appreciate your visit. Not to mention, she's also fond of those 2 girls of yours." Lucian sighed, staring at his father. "You are a grown man. Looking cute doesn't suit you in the slightest." Bianca and Nico stifled their laughter, while Hades frowned. What does that even mean? By then, they had reached the lobby of the Empire State Building and stepped outside, where a limousine awaited them. However, the scene was somewhat unusual. Their chauffeur was a full-fledged skeleton. Hades turned to Nico and Bianca. "I know the 2 of you lack a proper mode of transport, so I'm gifting you the limo, along with the butler." "Awesome," Nico muttered, his eyes sparkling in wonder. "A limo? We'll be like VIPs. Hades and Lucian both sneered at the same time. "That's because we are VIPs. They exchanged glances and smirked. Lucian then sighed, his shoulders slumping. "As much as I'd love to join you guys and revel in luxury, I have a commitment to take care of. Enjoy it without me. Ah, seriously? Nico asked, disappointed. It won't be as fun without you. Lucian smiled, ruffling Nico's hair. Thanks for the compliment. Turning to Hades, he added, I'll come down with the others in a bit. Just need to set a few things up and finish some business. Hades nodded, dismissing him. Lucian watched as the skeletal butler opened the limo door, allowing Bianca and Nico to climb in first. Then, sinking into his shadows, Lucian vanished. His form melted into the darkness, weaving between the crowds as he slipped away. Lucian arrived at a nearby park and stepped out of his shadow, clad in full armor, which he restored using his magic. A soft mist began to spread throughout the park, gradually erasing the presence of people and children, leaving the area eerily silent. As Lucian glanced down, he noticed a single undisturbed path cutting through the mist. Without hesitation, he followed it. After a few minutes of walking, he reached a large pond with a few benches positioned to overlook the serene waters. On one of those benches reclined a woman who could only be described as the most beautiful in the world, objectively speaking, of course. Her pink hair cascaded down her back, spilling past her waist, and she was dressed in a flowing pink toga. She lounged sideways on the bench with effortless grace, radiating an aura of pure allure. As Lucian approached, he noticed something unsettling. Her appearance kept shifting, morphing into different women from his life. First, his mother, then Annabeth, then Talia, even Hecate, and for the briefest of moments, Artemis. Lucian's expression darkened. I'd appreciate it if you stopped doing that. His voice was cold. Aphrodite chuckled, a teasing glint in her eyes. I'll try, but you have such a big heart, little brother. How does it manage to hold so much love and care for the women around you? It holds just as much hatred for my enemies, Lucian replied indifferently. Aphrodite giggled behind her hand. Ah, that is true. Those who experience the greatest love can also experience the deepest hatred. She tilted her head. But first things first, little brother, why the armor? First, stop calling me that. We're not close. Second, to protect my chastity. Lucian sneered. Aphrodite rolled her eyes and sighed. As much as you try to paint me as a villain, I'm not a monster. I would never go after someone underage. She smirked. Maybe in a few years, when you're a proper adult, we can revisit the discussion. She winked playfully. She then waved dismissively. You can relax. I'm not here to attack you. And even if I were, your armor wouldn't do much against a goddess. Lucian eyed her for a few seconds before shrugging and dismissing his armor. Running a hand through his hair, he exhaled heavily. All right, what do you want, Aphrodite? To satisfy my curiosity, of course, she said with a wide grin. Lucian gave her a blank stare. No, I won't go out with you. I hope that satisfies your curiosity. Without another word, he turned on his heel and started walking away. Yet, after only a few steps, he found himself back where he started, standing in front of Aphrodite as she lounged on the bench, watching him with an amused expression. She arched an eyebrow. You sure have a high opinion of yourself, don't you? That's not what I wanted to know. Her eyes glowed softly, and in the next instant, Lucian found himself within her grasp, her fingers gently tilting his chin upward so their eyes met. Besides, she whispered in a sultry tone, if I truly wanted to have you, you wouldn't stand a chance, little brother. A faint heat crept into Lucian's cheeks. But before Aphrodite could savor her victory, her amusement turned to surprise. A scythe was suddenly wrapped around her neck. Lucian's face was still close to hers, their foreheads nearly touching. His crimson eyes burned with something twisted, something unstable. A grin spread across his lips, exposing his sharp canines. Go ahead, he murmured, his voice laced with dark amusement. Twist my emotions. Make me fall so deeply in love with you that I can't live without you. Because that might be your only salvation. He leaned in even closer, his breath ghosting over her skin. Come on, act first, or I will. His voice carried an unnatural allure, laced with a charm that even a goddess would recognize. Wouldn't it be thrilling? He mused, his tone almost affectionate. A battle of will and emotion. Let's see. Will your power be strong enough to make me love you? Or will my desire to see your ichor stain my blade win instead? Lucian grasped her wrist and placed her hand over his heart. Love and insanity aren't so different, you know, he whispered, his scythe pressing ever so slightly against her neck. In fact, they might just be the same thing. So go on, test it. For a long moment, Aphrodite simply stared at him. Then, with a sigh, she waved a hand, and in the blink of an eye, Lucian was standing a safe distance away, his scythe no longer wrapped around her throat. Lucian frowned, disappointment flashing in his eyes. Coward, he scoffed. And here I was curious to see if you could actually do it. Aphrodite merely chuckled as she sat up, resting her elbow on the bench and propping her chin on her palm. Tilting her head, she smirked. I see. Part of my question has been answered. Her pink eyes gleamed. You don't just dislike me, little brother. No, no, no. You despise me. Her voice was laced with satisfaction. And that level of hatred can only come from something personal. Her smile widened. Now I'm dying to know, what did I do to make you hate me so much? Lucian's crimson eyes glowed as his lips curled into a slow, dangerous smile. You're dying to know? He repeated. Aphrodite nodded, clearly expecting an answer. Lucian's grin widened. Then die ignorant. Aphrodite let out a sigh, but something was different about it. This sigh was filled with exasperation, her eyes turning cold as they shone with a pink radiance. She gazed at Lucian, releasing a fraction of her divine might upon him. He grunted involuntarily as the sudden pressure bore down on him, yet he remained standing tall. The blessing of Heracles aided him, allowing him to resist without faltering. You know, she said, her voice deceptively calm, I'm being as friendly and patient as I possibly can. But as your father once said, even gods have limits. Just your words alone give me more than enough reason to smite you where you stand. I understand that people may not have the best opinion of me. Not that I care, but I try to build some familiarity with you by calling you little brother. However, it seems you've mistaken that for me being a pushover. As Aphrodite observed him, she noted how tightly clenched his jaw was, the muscles straining as veins pulsed along his forehead. His fists gripped his scythe so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. It was a miracle it hadn't already shattered under his strength. Yet what surprised her most was the look in his eyes. They were calm, far too calm. There was no fear, no worry, as if he didn't even recognize the danger he was in, as if a powerful goddess wasn't standing before him, declaring that she had every reason to smite him. That wasn't what she had intended. She had wanted to scare him, intimidate him, perhaps even get some answers to the questions that had piqued her curiosity. But it seemed her plan had ultimately failed. She withdrew her power, and Lucian's body visibly relaxed as the weight lifted. You weren't scared that I was going to kill you? Aphrodite asked. Lucian laughed at her words. Scared? Why the hell would I be scared? You couldn't possibly kill me. Oh, is that right? She asked coldly. Lucian grinned. Well, not so much couldn't. More like, you wouldn't dare to, he said mockingly, tilting his head arrogantly. Seeing her curiosity, Lucian decided to indulge her. You see, in this pantheon, I'm the demigod with the most connections. You could kill me, sure, but you'd be making a ton of enemies. Enemies even you couldn't afford to handle. He spread his arms wide, his grin widening into something almost devilish. For you see, I'm the one most beloved by fate, the direct disciple of the Titaness of magic, the prince acknowledged by the Underworld itself, the one blessed by the strongest. I have allies in the highest ranks of Olympus. While Lady Hestia isn't part of the council, you saw firsthand the level of respect she commands. And let's not forget, I'm her favorite nephew. Then there's my unique connection with the goddess of the hunt. I imagine she wouldn't take my demise lightly, which means you wouldn't just make an enemy of her, but of the god of the sun as well. He's quite protective of his sister, after all. Her enemies are his enemies. The god of blacksmithing, your own husband, though he'd never openly admit it, is rather fond of me and appreciative of my work. And the list goes on. Lucian placed a hand over his mouth and chuckled, his glowing pupils barely visible through the cracks of his crescent-shaped eyes. So go on, he taunted. You could kill me, but then that begs the question, how would the goddess of love handle the aftermath? By the gods. Both Aphrodite and Lucian shared the same stunned thought, though for different reasons. Aphrodite's astonishment was visible, her eyes slightly widening as she fully processed his words. Lucian, however, masked his own surprise behind his usual confidence. When the hell did I become so well-connected in the supernatural world? He inwardly wondered. I didn't even realize until I started listing them just how many powerful figures I've actually formed ties with. Aphrodite reeled slightly from the revelation. This boy, he truly is untouchable. He's right. I can't kill him. Not even Zeus would dare recklessly strike him down. He wasn't exaggerating when he said he was beloved by fate. The Moirai themselves interfered to stop Zeus. That alone speaks volumes about his importance to them. I don't think anyone has truly grasped the significance of their actions that day. She studied Lucian once again, taking in the way he stared at her with cold indifference, his disdain for her clear and unwavering. This boy, he's terrifying. But why? What did I do to make him hate me so much? No matter how much she searched her memories, she couldn't find a single reason for his intense hatred. In the end, there was only one thing she could do: ask him directly. Leaning back against the bench, she spread her arms and let out a resigned sigh. This time, however, it carried no frustration, only acceptance. All right, I'll admit it, she said, her tone apathetic. I can't touch you. You're the most untouchable demigod in the entire Greek pantheon. Congratulations. Her words lacked bitterness, but even for her, admitting defeat so easily was difficult. But now that begs the question. Aphrodite continued carefully. Why do you hate me so much? Where does this deep-seated dislike come from? Surely, it's not just because of my reputation. Lucian scoffed. I honestly couldn't care less about your reputation. In fact, I pity you more than anything. What? Aphrodite asked, her expression shifting to pure confusion. There was no anger, no defensiveness, just sheer bewilderment. She tilted her head slightly, staring at Lucian as if trying to decipher him. You pity me? Lucian shrugged. More or less. That's mostly because of the way I was raised. People see your story one way and form their own assumptions. To most, you're just the fickle, unfaithful goddess who cheats on her husband and torments him for no reason, despite everything he's already endured. Aphrodite's curiosity grew. And you? You don't share that view. No. I see a woman forced into a marriage she never wanted, fated never to be with the one she truly loved. Aphrodite froze. She stared at Lucian, disbelief written all over her face. What? Lucian continued, his voice even and unwavering. Everyone knows the tale of how you and your husband ended up together. You were the goddess of love, the so-called most beautiful goddess. You were desired by many, causing chaos and discord in Olympus as the gods all fought for your hand. Then came the god of blacksmiths, who, in his anger at how the queen of the gods treated him, trapped her in a throne she couldn't escape from. The only way for the king of the gods to appease him was to grant him a throne on the council, and to give him the most beautiful goddess as his wife. You had no choice in the matter. Your opinion didn't matter. Marrying you off was a convenient solution, to end the chaos your beauty caused and to appease the ugly blacksmith. A win-win scenario for everyone except for you. But there was a problem. You weren't in love with the blacksmith. You were in love with the god of war. The two of you were like the embodiment of passion itself, drawn to each other. And yet, despite all the trouble your beauty supposedly caused, you never married him. You never even had the chance. I never knew why until today. Lucian's cold gaze bore into her. Aphrodite sat with her head bowed, her hair falling over her face. Her fists were clenched, her lower lip trembling slightly as she bit down on it. Lucian took little notice of it and continued. The queen of the gods never approved of you, did she? His voice was sharp, cutting straight to the heart of the matter. She didn't think you were good enough for her darling son. She cares too much about him, and to her, You were unworthy. And so, you were forced into an unwanted marriage. You act out, sleeping around, hurting him, not because you're faithless, but because it's your only escape from a reality you never wanted. Lucian scoffed. Honestly, if I didn't loathe you as much as I do, I might have found your story tragic. The saying, all is fair in love and war, is meant to represent the kind of love you and the god of war embody, one of mutual desire and balance, where neither holds power over the other. I mean, the two of you even have a daughter together, the goddess of harmony, balance, and peace. How romantic is that? Aphrodite's voice was cold, but there was an undeniable weight behind it. Are you done? Lucian noticed the moisture in her eyes. She was holding herself together, barely. Unfortunately, he said simply. Reaching into his shirt, he pulled out a small bag that dangled from a thin cord around his neck. Aphrodite's eyes widened. Though the bag wasn't enchanted, she could sense what was inside. Are those ashes? Yes, Lucian answered, his tone devoid of emotion. Aphrodite remained silent as he continued. These are the ashes of a mortal woman whose emotions you and your bastard son once toyed with. He held the bag in his palm for a moment before bringing it to his lips, pressing a soft kiss against the fabric. Then, with deliberate care, he tucked it back beneath his shirt. Lucian's gaze burned with quiet fury as he met her eyes. My mother. Your mother? Aphrodite questioned, narrowing her eyes as she tried to recall anyone from the last 13 to 14 years who might match Lucian's appearance. But no matter how hard she searched her memory, nothing came to mind. And who exactly is your mother? I assume when you mentioned my bastard son, you were referring to my son, Eros. However, it's been a couple of decades since we last truly interacted or meddled with mortals together, for that matter. Lucian scoffed. Well, I doubt you remember the names or faces of every mortal woman whose life you've ruined. Aphrodite placed a hand over her mouth in thought, staring intently at Lucian, trying to discern his features. Eros and I have had our fair share of fun messing with mortal love. Wait, now that I think about it, earlier he showed some hostility toward Hera, though it was well hidden. If I weren't the goddess of love, I wouldn't have detected it. So Hera must be involved as well. A woman whom Eros, Hera, and I have dealt with. And he's a powerful magic user, enough to be acknowledged by Hecate. Children of Hades aren't usually known for their magic, so it must come from his mother's side. His mother must have been a witch. That shortens the list by a lot. A mortal witch. Hera, Eros, and I. Aphrodite's mind worked at the speed of a supercomputer, making connections that would have been impossible for an ordinary being. And then, suddenly, a face emerged in her thoughts, long black hair, piercing red eyes, superimposed over Lucian's features. Aphrodite's eyes widened in shock. She stood abruptly, staring at Lucian in disbelief. You're the son of Medea, she whispered in astonishment. Lucian began clapping slowly, an exaggerated look of mock surprise on his face. Wow, would you look at that? She got in one. Let's all give her a round of applause. He looked down at his shadow and said, Come on, everyone, join in. She deserves all the hands we can give. His shadow expanded, and multiple hands of varying shapes and sizes rose from the darkness, clapping in eerie unison. Aphrodite gave him a flat look. All right, that's just unnecessary. Lucian scoffed and waved a hand, making the clapping cease. His expression turned void of humor, his eyes half-lidded and glowing red as the shadowy hands slithered back into the floor. Well, congratulations, you're right. The princess of Colchis, priestess of Hecate, and the infamous witch of betrayal, Medea, is my mother, and I am her son. His voice turned cold. I am the son of the woman whose emotions you and your diaper-wearing bastard of a son so meticulously played with. The woman whose love you twisted, manipulated, until she was driven to madness. And in her insanity, she killed her 2 sons. My brothers. Lucian's eyes burned brighter. You are the cause of my mother's suffering, and that is something I will never forgive. So I hope that answers your question as to why I don't have a very high opinion of you. Aphrodite sat back down, still reeling from the revelation. But how? How could you possibly be your son? Unless Unless Hades and Medea met in the Underworld and had you, that would explain a few things. Lucian let her speculate, making no effort to correct her assumptions. After a moment of silence, Aphrodite sighed heavily, leaning back against the bench. What a mess. But you seriously can't be blaming all of that on me, can you? I mean, all I did was follow Hera's orders. I wouldn't have even bothered with Medea if it weren't for her. And I'm sure you can understand why she's a difficult person to say no to. Lucian tilted his head slightly, his brows furrowing in visible confusion. What? Aphrodite asked, noticing his expression. How is that any of my concern? Lucian replied, his voice sharp. What makes you think I would care whether you were ordered to or not? The fact remains that you are responsible for my mother's suffering. Whether you were commanded or not doesn't change that. Your hands are stained with blood. Just because someone placed the dagger in your hand doesn't absolve you of the crime. It doesn't make your hands any less red. I'm not denying that I played a part in what your mother went through. I'm just saying, don't worry, I understand exactly what you're trying to say. Lucian interrupted. That bitch queen is at the very top of my list, followed by anyone named Jason, then you and your son, and finally, her husband. Aphrodite sighed, covering her face. Is there anything I can do to earn your forgiveness? As much as I hate to admit it, having you as an enemy isn't in my best interest at the moment. I'd much rather have you as an ally. When she looked back at Lucian, she found him staring at her with pure disgust. I'd rather slit my own wrists and bleed out. How does that sound? Lucian scoffed. Is the matter really that unsalvageable? No. If you manage to earn my mother's forgiveness, then we can talk, Lucian replied with a grin. Oh, come on, that's impossible. I'm not sure if you know this, but my role in making her fall for Jason wasn't what drove her crazy. She was already unstable. She was a cunning witch. That's what drew Hera to her in the first place. She knew Jason and the Argonauts wouldn't have made it far without magic, and Medea was the perfect candidate. She was ruthless, powerful, and useful. So Hera used me to make her fall in love with Jason. And again, so what? Lucian shot back. Tell me honestly, would she have fallen for Jason if you hadn't intervened? Aphrodite hesitated. Yeah, I won't deny my mother had a few screws loose. I even inherited some of them. But your interference made her love Jason. No, not love, obsession. And that obsession drove her insane. Of course, she was already a bit mad. Everything about her was. So when you added love into the mix, it was bound to be just as twisted and dangerous as the rest of her. And you didn't just make her love him. You made her infatuated. Lucian scoffed in disgust. Honestly, just talking to you for this long is driving me insane, and that's saying something. He glanced at his imaginary watch and said in a deadpan tone, Would you look at that? I've officially run out of fucks to give. I no longer give a single fuck about continuing this conversation. What? Aphrodite started, but he cut her off. I'm leaving. Listen, I've stayed longer than I needed to. If I had to choose between continuing this meaningless, aimless conversation or going my beautiful and amazing girlfriend on her birthday, I'm sure you know which one I'd choose. Lucian closed his eyes and muttered, Well, my mother taught me not to be rude and to always say my farewells before leaving. Then, with a smirk, he held up both middle fingers. Here, enjoy these farewells. Without hesitation, his shadows consumed him, and he vanished, leaving behind a devilish grin. Aphrodite clenched her jaw, the muscles tightening as she watched him disappear. That rube rat. Hades should teach him some manners before someone else does, she grumbled. Lucian arrived back at the top of the hill, the place he teleported to the most. He released a heavy sigh as the tension left his shoulders. He crouched down, running a hand through his hair, which had grown since his last cut. It now reached the middle of his nape, with his bangs partially covering his eyes. By the gods, who knew talking to her would be so draining? My entire social battery is completely depleted. How annoying. Pushing himself up, he started walking back toward camp. When he arrived, he found Percy, Annabeth, and Talia sitting on the steps of the big house, appearing much more relaxed than before. Lucian, Annabeth called him over. Lucian swayed his way toward them, his arms swinging lazily at his sides as if he were about to collapse. Talia and Annabeth scooted apart, making room for him, and Lucian plopped down between them. Percy leaned against the porch railing, watching. "That bad, huh?" Percy asked as Lucian leaned all the way back, staring up at the sky. "Don't even get me started. You guys seem awfully carefree and unconcerned. Aren't you at least going to ask me how it went?" Annabeth already figured it out, Talia said with an amused scoff. "From the image of Ares you sent, she deduced that your father traded Ares for Nico and Bianca's safety. Nice picture, by the way. I only wish I could print it out." Though Clarice wasn't exactly a fan, Percy added with a laugh before awkwardly rubbing the back of his head. "Speaking of Nico and Bianca, where are they?" Annabeth asked. Lucian smirked faintly, eyes closed. "Dad gifted them a limo. They're experiencing the luxurious life." He leaned over, resting his head on Annabeth's shoulder. She smiled and rested her head against his. "A limo?" Talia raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, it even comes with their own professional butler," Lucian chuckled. "Okay, now I'm starting to get a little jealous. Am I not my father's only son, Demigod's son? Why am I not getting spoiled too? There's got to be a ton of treasure at the bottom of the ocean," Percy grumbled. The moment he looked up, he saw all three of them staring at him with amused expressions. His cheeks reddened as he realized how he sounded. Lucian glanced up at Annabeth from her shoulder. "You didn't create the light core yet, did you?" Annabeth sighed and shook her head. "I never had the chance to." "Good. It's about time I give you my birthday present. Hand it over." Annabeth raised an eyebrow but complied, reaching into her pouch and pulling out an empty core, placing it in his hands. "Watch and be amazed," Lucian said with a grin, encapsulating the metal sphere between his hands. To their shock, his skin began to change color. Blood-red markings slithered up his arms, and his hair turned snow-white. When he opened his eyes, they burned with a golden hue, an arrogant glint flashing within them. They instinctively recoiled as they felt the warmth radiating from Lucian's bright heart form. A wave of shimmering light particles flowed from his hands into the core. The sphere illuminated with a blinding white glow, forcing the others to shield their eyes and turn away. As the light receded, Lucian slowly opened his palms, revealing a white and golden glowing core. Closing his eyes, he exhaled, and his skin began to return to normal. The deep melanin melted back into his complexion, his hair darkened to pitch black, and his golden eyes faded to red once more. Talia, Percy, and Annabeth just stared at him in disbelief. "What the hell was that?" Percy blurted. "Since when can you change your appearance and use the power of light? Is that what you were learning while you were away?" Talia asked, clearly intrigued. Annabeth, meanwhile, stared at him with an enamored expression. "Please tell me the real gift was that you finally matched my skin tone. Because, wow, I never knew I needed a tan Lucian in my life until this very moment." Lucian sighed and pointed at Percy. "It's a technique. And since a week ago." Then he pointed at Talia. "Yes." Finally, he turned to Annabeth and rolled his eyes. "Anyway, here, this is the present I wanted to give you." He placed the glowing light core in her hands and leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to her cheek. "Happy birthday," he murmured. Annabeth blushed, a grin spreading across her face. She clenched her fist around the core, feeling the warmth radiating from the energy inside. She drew the core close to her chest, closing her eyes as she embraced its warmth. Then, suddenly, her eyes widened with realization. Turning toward Lucian, the corners of her lips twitched as she struggled to suppress a grin. "Lucian, I want you to be completely honest with me when I ask this. Please do not lie." Lucian blinked in confusion, wondering what she was about to ask. Still smiling, Annabeth watched him closely. The moment he gave a small, upward nod, signaling for her to continue, her grin widened. "Did you disappear for an entire week just to learn light magic, just so I wouldn't have to ask someone from the Apollo cabin for help? Because you didn't want them to be known as the father of my next creation?" Lucian instantly flushed, his ears burning red as he turned his gaze away. "No, Lucian," Annabeth drawled, her voice laced with amusement. "Maybe," he mumbled. "That was all it took." Annabeth erupted into laughter, slapping her knee as Lucian buried his face in his hands, looking thoroughly embarrassed. Lucian, I wasn't even going to ask them for help, she admitted, her tone soft and endearing. I plan to collect solar energy using a ritual and store it in solar batteries to charge the core. Lucian groaned loudly, dragging his hands down his face. Ugh! Annabeth suddenly let out an exaggerated sound, overcome with sheer cuteness aggression. Before Lucian could react, she tackled him off the stairs, sending them both rolling onto the ground. God, you're just so adorable. I love you. I love you. I love you, she declared, raining kisses all over his face. Percy, watching from the porch, wrinkled his nose in disgust. You guys are so freaking weird, I swear. Talia, standing beside him, wore an awkward expression as she observed the scene. Yeah, this is something, she muttered. Lucian, on the other hand, looked completely unbothered. If anything, he seemed smugly pleased with all the affection. Percy pointed at them. That's your best friend and your boyfriend, by the way. Talia groaned. Ugh, don't remind me. Meanwhile, Annabeth showed no signs of stopping. Moi, moi, moi. She pressed kisses against his forehead, cheeks, eyelids, even his nose. Some passing campers paused to watch, some chuckling at the display, while others found it endearing. Finally, Annabeth captured his lips in a lingering kiss before pulling away, smiling down at him. Thanks for the present, she murmured sweetly. Then, just as Lucian was about to relax, she leaned down, her lips brushing his ear, and whispered in a sultry, teasing tone, Now come on, it's time you and I went and made our daughter. Lucian's eyes shot open wide, his face turning an even deeper shade of red as Annabeth pulled back and winked before skipping off ahead. Left lying on the ground, staring at the sky, he groaned, utterly flustered. Why did she have to word it like that? Seeing Lucian stand and follow after Annabeth, Talia and Percy exchanged a look. With a shrug, they decided to follow as well, curiosity getting the better of them. Percy vaulted over the porch fence while Talia pushed herself up from the steps. The two of them caught up to Lucian, who was brushing himself off as he walked behind Annabeth, who was practically skipping with every step. Lucian leaned back and, in a low voice so Annabeth wouldn't hear, said, My dad wants to invite Annabeth to celebrate her birthday in the Underworld. You two up for it? Sure, Talia replied with a shrug. Percy crossed his arms. Hell no. Lucian raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. Seeing their looks, Percy raised 2 fingers. 2 reasons. 1. I've had enough Underworld adventures for one summer. That place terrifies me. If I never have to go back, I'll consider it a blessing. Pussy, Talia and Lucian said at the same time. They looked at each other and smirked, then fist bumped. I seriously hate you guys sometimes, Percy said flatly. Lucian and Talia puffed out their chests proudly, causing Percy to roll his eyes. And 2, Percy continued, it sounds like a very intimate family moment. I'd just be standing there awkwardly. I don't do well with awkward situations. I'd rather save myself the hassle. When he looked at them for their reaction, both Lucian and Talia just stared at him like he was an idiot. What? Percy asked, annoyed. I hate that look. Lucian rolled his eyes. Percy, what do you mean, intimate family moment? We are immediate family. We're direct cousins. Our dads are brothers. My dad is your uncle. What's there to feel awkward about? Percy looked down, trying to hide the growing smile on his face. Lucian might not have realized it, but those words meant more to Percy than he let on. Then Percy froze. Slowly, he turned to look at both Talia and Lucian. Both of them raised an eyebrow, confused by the sudden change. What? Lucian asked. What's with the face? Talia added. You two are cousins too. Percy whispered like he was sharing a forbidden secret. Direct cousins, and you're dating. Isn't that like incest or something? Lucian and Talia froze, exchanged a long side-eye, then shrugged. We're Greek, they said in unison. What? Percy stammered as they resumed walking. He jogged to catch up. What kind of answer is that? What does being Greek have to do with anything? Lucian clapped a hand on Percy's shoulder and gave him a confident thumbs up. Everything. Talia crossed her arms and nodded in agreement. Percy looked utterly baffled. You know, you guys love calling me an idiot, but I swear, you're no better. Before either of them could respond, Annabeth's voice rang out from the front entrance of Lucian's obsidian cabin. Can you guys hurry up? We're burning daylight here. They decided to drop the matter for now and followed her inside. Annabeth was already racing down toward the basement. Lucian casually trotted down after her, hands in his pockets. As he descended, his shadow expanded behind him, and from it emerged identical doppelgangers of himself. Without a word, they headed to the kitchen, already following the mental order to prepare a 5-star meal for the birthday girl. In the basement, Percy flopped into a leather chair and immediately began spinning in it. "So what are you guys doing exactly?" he asked mid-spin. "Creating Nox a sister," Annabeth replied cheerfully. From her shadow, Nox emerged, arms crossed as he leaned against the wall. "Cool, cool, cool," Percy said, still spinning as he watched them with mild curiosity. Annabeth grabbed another chair from the side of the room. It was the same wooden one they'd used to create Nox. She placed it in the center of the room where the magic circle still lay. Lucian didn't feel like standing, so he crafted a chair from his shadow. Talia, unbothered, settled onto his lap, casually draping her arms over his shoulders. Percy still gave them a weird look, unable to shake his earlier realization. They all watched as Annabeth happily hummed, pulling out doll-like body parts from her magical pouch, assembling the body of her next homunculus with focused precision. The doll surface was stitched with glowing runes, each line etched with bright light that pulsed faintly. Lucian scanned the runic script and recognized a familiar pattern, similar to the ones used to create Nox. He noted a few key differences too, slight tweaks in design and intent. Annabeth tapped the chest compartment twice, and it popped open. She pulled out a warm, glowing core and carefully placed it inside the empty cavity before sealing it shut. The runes blazed like flashlights, now fully awakened with a surreal, ethereal glow. Percy stopped spinning in his chair, now fully intrigued by the process. Annabeth stepped back, extended her arm, and closed her eyes. She began to chant rapidly in ancient Greek, the words flowing too fast and too obscure for Percy to follow. "What is she saying?" Percy thought to himself, squinting. "I can only catch every fifth word." But he quickly forgot the language barrier as the scene unfolded. The magic circle lit up. The mechanical puppet rose from the chair, floating in mid-air. Unlike Nox's birth, shrouded in suffocating darkness, this ritual burst into a blinding radiance, flooding the basement with golden light. It was almost too intense to bear. Annabeth shut her eyes tightly. Lucian and Percy turned away, hissing. Talia simply buried her face in Lucian's neck. Nox growled lowly, glaring at the light with an instinctual disgust. Something deep within him screamed that he was staring at a natural rival. The golden light began to shape itself, strands of light forming flowing golden hair, then a slender, elegant body. The figure within grew, taking on a distinctly feminine form. Armor of light wrapped around her chest, a silk-like cloth draped around her waist, and a crown-like mask formed around her eyes. Wings of radiant energy extended behind her like the rays of dawn. Lucian cracked his eyes open just in time to see blood trickling from Annabeth's nose again, but she wore a wild grin, unfazed by her condition. Her body trembled. Lucian glanced at Nox, subtly gesturing. Nox understood immediately, diving through the sparse shadows and catching Annabeth just as her legs buckled. The glow of the circle faded. The newly born light homunculus floated gently to the ground, landing with grace before bowing to Annabeth. Nox eyed her with scorn and muttered, "Show off." The radiant woman simply smiled in silence, her calm demeanor infuriating him further. Annabeth chuckled breathlessly, blood staining her lips. "Your name shall be Lucy." "Not in a million years," Lucian interrupted flatly. Annabeth burst into giggles. "Relax, I'm joking. I already had a name in mind. Since Nox's name is Latin, I wanted to stick to the theme. And since she's our daughter, I thought her name should begin with Luc. So, her name shall be Lucerna, which means light, just like Lucian's name." She turned toward the radiant being with a proud smile. From now on, your name shall be Lucerna. I thank thee, my creator, for granting me a name, she said in a soft, melodious voice that matched her divine presence. Congrats, dude. Percy teased, grinning as he glanced at Lucian. You're a dad again. Lucian raised his middle finger without a word. Percy cracked up instantly. Annabeth, leaning against Nox for support, reached to her side and pulled out a vial. She drank it in one go, the liquid restoring both her energy and lost blood. She let out a content sigh, as if she'd just sipped away all her problems. Though the effects took a moment to fully kick in, she continued using Nox as a steadying presence. Clearing her throat, Annabeth smiled warmly and finally introduced herself properly. As you know, I'm the one who created you. As such, you may refer me as Mom, Mommy, Mama, whatever feels right. No need to be formal. I see all my creations as my children. She extended a hand, gently caressing Lucerna's golden-tinted cheek. Her other hand rested softly on Nox. Lucerna's usual thin, lukewarm smile shifted into something broader and more genuine. I am honored by such a privilege. In that case, I shall refer to you as Mother. Annabeth nodded approvingly. Now, then, do you see that very cute, super handsome boy over there? She said, pointing to Lucian. Lucian sighed. All right, I know weird things happen around me, but seriously, there has to be a limit, he muttered. Talia chuckled and patted his head, trying to comfort him. Lucerna's polite smile returned as she glanced at Lucian, then back to Annabeth, giving a respectful nod. That boy right there is your father. Your body and self come from me, but your energy and power, they come from him. You are the result of our union. Don't say it like that, Lucian exclaimed. Annabeth only gave him a mischievous look, sticking her tongue between her teeth playfully. Lucerna clasped her hands together and, in a reverent tone, said, I see. So he is the originator of the sacred power of light I now wield. I greet you, father. Lucian let out a small growl. I'm only 13, and already 2 people call me father, he muttered. Then he sighed, offering Lucerna a polite smile. Hello. Welcome to the land of the living, Lucerna. Talia burst out laughing, clutching her stomach from the force of it. She laughed so hard she had to get up from his lap. Lucian turned to Nox, teasing, see? Why couldn't you have been this polite and sweet when you were first created? Nox clicked his non-existent teeth in annoyance and turned his head away. You may stand, Lucerna, Annabeth said, noticing the girl was still kneeling. Lucerna rose, casting a brief, smug, confident glance toward Nox. In response, Nox extended his arms. Shadows surged forward, forming sharp tendrils that shot toward Lucerna with intent to stab. Lucerna raised her hand, and twin long swords manifested in a burst of ethereal golden light. She lunged, slashing the tendrils with elegant precision. As the tendrils were cut, they erupted into volatile energy, pushing Lucerna back and causing her to skid across the ground. Nox held out 2 open hands, summoning a long spear made of darkness. He lunged forward, thrusting the weapon at the same time. Lucerna charged again, her swords poised. Their weapons collided midair, releasing a shockwave of elemental light and shadow. Percy, seated nearby, was sent rolling back into a table as everyone's hair whipped violently in the forceful gust. It became a battle of strength, Nox's spear pressing down against Lucerna's crossed blades. Nox, showing only his narrowed eyes, remained stoic and unreadable. Lucerna, whose mouth was only visible, had her lips pressed into a firm line, betrayed no weakness of her own. That's enough out of both of you, Annabeth said coldly. Lucerna and Nox immediately froze, quickly disengaging and letting go of their weapons. Placing a hand on her forehead, Annabeth sighed. I get that you two might not get along because of your opposing elements, but that doesn't mean I want to see you at each other's throats. Do I make myself clear? Yes, Mother, they both said meekly, heads bowed in shame. Though her expression was hidden behind a mask, Lucerna puffed out her cheeks in a visible pout. You got me in trouble with Mother, she mumbled at Nox. Nox scoffed. You need to learn your place. I was created first, which makes me the eldest. Don't go acting like you're better than me. Nox, stand down. We need to test Lucerna's capabilities first, Annabeth ordered. But first, she turned to Lucian, a playful grin spreading across her face. On a scale of 1 to 10, how attractive was I when you saw me acting like a mother? Yuck. Gross. Percy groaned, recoiling. Did I really just hear that? I wasn't asking you, Percy. Annabeth snapped. Why are you even here? I was bored and curious, he replied, giving 2 enthusiastic thumbs up. Rolling her eyes, Annabeth muttered, Let's get this over with quickly, then turned to Lucerna. We've already seen your use of hard light when you created your swords. That'll be useful when applied properly. Let's see what else. As you command, Mother, Lucerna said, extending a hand and waving it past Annabeth, causing her to vanish slowly. Invisibility, check. Annabeth's voice echoed despite her absence. When she reappeared, the entire room around them had transformed. It looked as though they were floating among the clouds, drifting in a bright blue sky. Illusions, check. Lucian noted silently how Lucerna's abilities mirrored many of his own in his bright heart form, though her light lacked solar influence and instead seemed purely radiant. He looked down, resting a hand on his chin thoughtfully. Since Nox can use his darkness to cause decay, then it stands to reason. Hey, Lucerna, Lucian called, reaching into his shadow and pulling out the stinger of a chimera he'd stored earlier. Yes, father, she responded gently. Lucian then summoned Akir, one of the demons he'd recently slain during his trip to the Empire State Building, and let her slice open his arm before unsummoning her. Everyone stared in disbelief as blood dripped from Lucian's arm. Without flinching, he held it out toward Lucerna. I'm now injured and infected with a disease thanks to the cure, he said. Help me. Lucerna panicked and rushed over. She extended her hand, and soft light in the form of glowing fireflies began raining down on his wound. The cut began to close, slowly, but the healing worked. Lucian nodded in approval. Well, add healing and ailment curing to her repertoire, Lucian remarked. He glanced at the scar, sighed, and discreetly used his darkness to fully heal it properly. Annabeth nodded in satisfaction, then turned toward Lucerna. Power saving mode. Lucerna sparkled, her armor and mask shattering like glass. She shrank into a small wisp of radiant energy, golden with blood-red eyes, nearly identical in form to Nox. Lucian and Talia's expressions immediately melted as they stared at the tiny, adorable spirit. Once it was over, Lucian cracked his knuckles with a sharp pop. Now it's my turn, he said with a glint in his eye as he stood up. What? They all asked in unison, surprised by the sudden declaration. Lucian's expression turned cold. Arise. That single word, soft and chilling, seemed to echo with unnatural weight, sending shivers down their spines. The Carice Lucian had defeated began to stir. One by one they rose, red-eyed, faceless women cloaked in shadow, their large crow-like wings unfolding ominously. The backs of their wings were pitch black, while the front shimmered with a sinister red glow that pulsed like dying embers. Talia narrowed her eyes, observing the eerie sight. Are you going to assimilate them into a single shadow? She asked, more fascinated than afraid. Yup, Lucian replied, holding out his hand. His palm turned utterly black, as if light itself had been swallowed. Wisps of darkness curled outward like smoke. The Carice forms distorted as they were drawn into his palm, their shadows unraveling and spiraling inward. Lucian then clasped his hands together. A red glow leaked from between his fingers like molten cracks in stone. When he finally released them, his palm remained dark, but now a black sphere hovered above it. Inside the orb, 23 tiny red motes of light drifted like stars caught in tar. Lucian began pinching and pulling the sphere with his free hand, shaping it like clay. What is he doing? Percy whispered, glancing at Talia and Annabeth. Shadow sculpting, Annabeth explained. He's fusing their shadows into one entity, and now he's crafting what its body will look like. Huh, that's actually kind of cool. Can he make, like, dragons or something? Percy asked. Annabeth shook her head. Not exactly. The final form has to resemble what the original spirits once were. If it deviates too far, the outer shell shatters. He can tweak minor features, like horns or claws, but the essence has to match. A bit of horn flair for intimidation, Lucian muttered to himself. After a moment, he held up the finished product in his palm, a shadow figurine. It had small wings, twin demon-like horns curling from its head, and an aura of restrained malice. Without hesitation, he dropped the figurine into his own shadow. He grimaced as magic poured from him, siphoned away like blood through a wound. When the pulse stopped, he let out a slow breath. Arise, he commanded once more. From the inky depths of the shadow, she emerged, like a fallen angel reborn from hellfire. A demoness with blood-red skin and polished obsidian horns rose gracefully. She wore a sleek, shadow-woven toga that clung elegantly to her form. Two vast wings unfolded, stretching across the room, feathers glimmering with crimson undertones. With deliberate grace, she folded them behind her back. She knelt, one hand over her heart, claws long and razor-sharp. Her voice, devoid of emotion, yet chilling in its clarity, rang out. My lord. Lucian looked down at her with a calm gaze. Murder, he said. That shall be your name, and your purpose. As you will it, she replied, bowing low, so shall it be. Murder? Talia asked, raising an eyebrow. Lucian grinned. You saw the crow women, right? They nodded. A group of crows is called a murder, and since she was born from a whole flock of them. Ah! They all exclaimed in unison, realization dawning. Lucian turned to Annabeth and said, Now that this is officially over and done with, let's go celebrate your birthday the right way. Ooh, what do you have planned? Annabeth asked, curiosity lighting up her face. This is my cue to leave, Percy said, standing up and flashing two peace signs just above his head, already anticipating what came next. You guys go enjoy yourselves. Coward. Both Talia and Lucian retorted in unison. A coward who's probably going to live longer than any of you, guaranteed. Percy replied, backing away slowly with his hands still up. Then he paused, pointing a finger at Lucian. Can you save me some leftovers? Nope. Party guests only, Lucian said, turning his head away just slightly. I'll tell Grover you cooked and didn't save him anything. Percy grinned wickedly. Lucian narrowed his eyes. Are you seriously threatening me right now? For free food? Absolutely, Percy said, snapping his fingers in Lucian's direction. Lucian rolled his eyes, though a small smile tugged at the corner of his lips. Fine. Percy pumped his fist in victory, opened the door, and called back. Oh, and happy birthday, Annabeth. Thank you, she called out graciously as Percy shut the door behind him, leaving the three of them alone. Annabeth turned to Lucian with a curious smile. What was that about? Then her eyes sparkled. Wait, did you cook something for me? Yeah, a small feast. My dad invited us to the Underworld earlier when I saw him. He wants to celebrate your birthday. Annabeth said, walking over and wrapping her arms around him. Thanks, Lucy. Yeah. Lucian muttered, waving her off, though he smiled faintly. From beneath the door, shadows slithered through the room, merging with Lucian's own. Shall we get going? He asked. Are you kidding me? No, I need to get ready. I'm literally covered in blood after creating Lucerna. I can't show up looking like a crime scene. Give me a sec. She motioned to the dark stains on her shirt. Knox, take me to my cabin, Annabeth commanded. Knox nodded, and swirling shadows enveloped her, consuming her completely. She's really enjoying those new powers, Lucian said with a wry smile. He doubted she'd walk anywhere normally ever again. I would be too if I were in her position, Talia replied. Anyway, I'm going to let Chiron know we're heading out. Unlike you, we don't have that luxury. Hey, just thought of something, Lucian said, tapping his chin. Aren't you technically turning 18 this December? Would you still need Chiron's permission then? We don't talk about my age, Talia said solemnly. I stopped counting after I got stuck being 15 forever. Let's not phrase it like that and make it weird, Lucian said, raising his hands cautiously. That's a whole rabbit hole of moral ambiguity I don't think we're ready to unpack. Lucian, our entire relationship can be described as moral ambiguity. I'm technically about to be 18, and you're 13. I'm pretty sure I'm committing a crime. Hey, I'll happily be the victim here, Lucian said, hands still raised in mock surrender. Talia rolled her eyes, amused, and shook her head. Whatever, dork. Then she turned and headed out. Annabeth sat in front of Sebastian, gripping the reins with a wide smile. Lucian sat behind her, one hand resting lightly at her waist, while Talia held onto him from the back, her arms wrapped around his stomach. This is great. Annabeth laughed gleefully. She puckered her lips and made playful kissing noises. Hiya, she shouted, flicking the reins. Sebastian raised his two front hooves, neighing loudly before diving into the shadows. I'm so making my next homunculus able to transform into animals. This is awesome. Annabeth cheered as they glided through the shadow void. Within seconds, they maneuvered through the dark realm and reappeared in the Underworld, thanks to Lucian. As the recognized prince of the Underworld, he didn't need to use the standard entrances scattered around the world. They landed at the castle entrance, where a gargantuan three-headed dog lay with its heads resting. Upon spotting Lucian, all three heads perked up and grinned, tails wagging excitedly. After dismounting from Sebastian, they performed the usual ritual, playing with the big fluffy three-headed dog before heading into the castle. Lucian led the way to the lounge, where he sensed their presence. Inside, he found Medea sitting between Nico and Bianca. And this here is when Lucian fell asleep in the shower, and I had to go fetch him because he wasn't answering, Medea said, pointing to a holographic image. Nico and Bianca erupted in laughter. Why the hell are you showing them that? Lucian shouted, flabbergasted. Oh, Lucian. Hello, honey. How are you? Medea said sweetly, turning off the light projection and tucking the crystal away. Don't hello, honey me, woman. I have an image to maintain, and you're destroying it, Lucian grumbled. Sorry, my love. They were curious about what you were like as a kid, and you know I can't help myself with that topic. It's my most treasured memory, she replied proudly. Nico and Bianca were still wiping away tears of laughter. Hades lounged comfortably in a decorative chair, enjoying the lively atmosphere. I'm destroying that crystal the moment I get my hands on it, Lucian muttered under his breath. Medea playfully narrowed her eyes. I won't let you. She stood and wrapped Annabeth in a warm hug. Happy birthday, sweetie. I'm so glad you chose to celebrate it with us. Thank you, mother-in-law. I'm honored father-in-law invited me over, Annabeth replied graciously before turning to bow toward Hades, as Medea hugged both Lucian and Talia. Then Annabeth cleared her throat. But first, mother-in-law, father-in-law, I want to introduce you to some new additions to our family. Oh my gods, Lucian muttered, face-palming. PFTT. Talia covered her mouth, stifling her laughter. She already had a good idea where this was going. Annabeth reached into both pockets and pulled out two chibi elemental spirits, one light, one dark. I'd like you to meet your grandchildren, she declared, holding her palms up as the tiny spirits floated above them. Guo, the chibi elementals greeted in adorable, high-pitched voices. Kaya, Medea squealed in delight. Hades glanced at Lucian with a raised eyebrow. Lucian only shrugged in return as if to say, don't ask me. Meanwhile, in the overworld, location, New York, Manhattan. A tall boy wearing a large yellow hoodie crossed the street from Central Park and approached the towering structure of the American Museum of Natural History. He climbed the steps, paid the entrance fee, and slipped into the bustling halls of the museum. People moved about in clusters, following guides or exploring exhibits. The boy quietly joined a tour group of high school students, blending in effortlessly. They passed the dinosaur exhibit, then the art section, before arriving at ancient civilizations. The tour guide gestured toward a glass case surrounded by red ropes. Inside was a golden Corinthian helmet, polished to a fine shine with a proud crest on top. What you see here is the helm of King Leonidas, the legendary king of Sparta. He's most famous for leading 300 Spartans against the vast Persian army at the Battle of Thermopylae in 480 BC, a powerful symbol of courage and resistance. The guide went on, sharing trivia and insights before leading the group onward. Everyone followed, except the boy in the yellow hoodie. His face was hidden, but the wide grin stretching across it was unmistakable. So there it is, the last item I need. With this, I'll finally be able to finish the gladiator potion. He raised his head slightly. Reflected in the glass was the face of Luke Castellan, an ancient armament worn by a legendary warrior. This is too perfect, he said with a grin. How can they leave a treasure like this unguarded? Aren't they afraid someone might steal it? Luke sighed, shaking his head. Great, now I'm talking to myself. That bastard's rubbing off on me. He turned his back and walked away, but something was different. The helmet inside the glass case was gone. Tucked neatly under Luke's arm was the very same golden helmet. With his free hand, he tugged his hood lower and vanished in a blur, leaving only an afterimage in his place. Nox and Lucerna stood tall in their full body forms, Lucerna's wings neatly withdrawn. Both nodded respectfully toward Hades and Medea. Greetings, grandfather, grandmother. It is our pleasure to make your acquaintance, they said in unison, their words smooth and practiced, almost like a rehearsed line. Medea circled around them, eyes sparkling with excitement as she examined them from head to toe. These are homunculi. No, more than that. Artificial magical spirits. And they're truly alive. That's remarkable. I can sense Lucian's magic in both of their cores. Yup, they were technically given consciousness through my spiritual power, Annabeth said, blushing as she swayed side to side, hands holding her cheeks. So, in a way, it was kind of like a union between Lucian and me. She giggled before adding, thanks to receiving Lucian's essence, I was able to... Okay, that's enough out of you, weirdo, Lucian interrupted, reaching over and covering her mouth. Annabeth's eyes closed into little contented crescents, clearly unbothered, while Medea chuckled, amused by Annabeth's not-so-subtle innuendo. With a joyful gleam in her eyes, Medea pulled Nox and Lucerna into her arms, eyes misty with emotion. Come, let Grandmama spoil you rotten. Lucian glanced over at Hades, who was staring into the distance with a distracted, thoughtful expression. What's got you so lost in thought? Lucian asked, stepping around Medea as she nuzzled her cheeks against the spirits. He plopped down next to Nico and Bianca, who were barely holding back laughter as they stared at him. Nothing. Hades sighed. I can't help but wonder, when was the last time someone actually referred to me as a grandfather? Or that I even had a grandchild? You know how rare it is for me to have children because of the pact. And even when I do, most of them don't survive long enough to have kids of their own. Honestly, I think the last one who managed it was my son, Hitler. Lucian immediately held up a hand. All right, I'm going to stop you right there, Pops. Let's not. I really don't need a reminder that one of my brothers was Hitler. What's wrong with Adolf? He was a good kid. Just wanted to get into art school, Hades said with a head tilt. Who's Hitler? Nico asked, overhearing the conversation. Lucian placed a solemn hand on Nico's shoulder. He's our father's most favorite son. Lucian, Hades scolded, clearly unamused. Meanwhile, ashes of a Roman slave. Luke muttered, standing alone in a dimly lit hotel room. A pot simmered in front of him on a portable stove as he stirred the murky mixture inside. He glanced at a card beside the stove, carefully reading the listed ingredients. Reaching for a worn leather pouch, he opened it and gently tipped in a small amount of cremated ash, watching as it sank into the gray liquid. Luke grimaced slightly. I really hope this is sanitary. He mumbled, stirring the concoction as it shifted from dull gray to a vibrant copper green. He exhaled deeply, his shoulders slumping as he stared into the nearly completed potion. Though he'd never say it aloud, a heavy loneliness weighed on him. Today should be Annabeth's birthday, he muttered. Then, shaking his head, he added, not that it's any of my concern, his voice echoing in the silence. He checked the card again. Lastly, the armament of an ancient. He reached over to the counter and picked up a helmet. holding it with a furrowed brow. He looked between it and the potion, then gently lowered it into the pot. It floated awkwardly, and Luke couldn't help but let out a brief laugh at the absurd sight. Still, he followed the instructions. As he stirred, the helmet began to dissolve, its metallic form melting into the mixture, transforming the color into a rich, molten gold. The more he stirred, the faster it changed, until the liquid glowed like sunlight. Once done, he grabbed a rag, lifted the pot, and carefully poured the potion into a vial. He held the finished product in his hand, his grin returning. With this, I'm one step closer. Not just to beating him, but the gods too. Without hesitation, Luke tilted the vial back and drank it in one long gulp, his atoms apple bobbing as the golden liquid disappeared. Luke wiped his mouth and groaned as he leaned forward on the counter, gripping it tightly. Wow, that tasted horrible. He blinked slowly, trying to steady his breathing. His heart began to pound, and the world around him seemed to blur, shifting like a reflection in disturbed water. The hotel walls melted into abstract smears of color, and the ground beneath him rippled like it was alive. Wow, what the hell? Then came the whispers, low at first, like a breeze curling beneath a locked door. But they grew louder, harsher, angry. Thousands of voices hissing, snarling, mocking. Traitor. Failure. Puppet. Luke stumbled back from the counter, clutching his head. Shut up. He hissed, teeth gritted. The whispers laughed at him. Echoes of people he once knew. The gods, demigods, his old friends. Annabeth, Talia, even Lucian. Shut up, he screamed, grabbing a nearby chair and hurling it at the wall. The chair shattered, but the voices only grew louder. They were inside him now, scraping at his skull, clawing at his reason. His legs buckled. He collapsed onto the floor, his body convulsing. His veins glowed, faintly black and sinister beneath his skin, and smoke poured from his mouth and eyes. Something inside him clawed to get out. He screamed as if he were being split in two, writhing like a dying animal. Muscles stretched, tore, then reformed stronger. His spine popped grotesquely as he arched off the floor. His fingers twisted into claws for a moment before snapping back to normal. His teeth lengthened into fangs, then receded. He gasped, sweat pouring off him as the voices surged again. NNGH, shut up. I'm not yours. The whispers didn't care. Luke screamed until his throat bled. Blood dripped from his nose and ears. His eyes burned as if molten iron had been poured into them. His body jolted and spasmed, shadowy tendrils erupting from his back like wings of darkness before twisting violently and sinking back into him. Dark, deer-like antlers broke through the skin on his forehead, painting his entire face red. He lay gasping, the world fading in and out. His mind teetered on the edge of oblivion. Lucian, the name slipped unbidden into his thoughts. In that endless torment, something sparked inside him. Rage, envy, obsession, not just hate for the gods, but a deep, burning need to outshine him. Lucian with all his gifts. Lucian, who had everything handed to him, power, love, loyalty. And yet, he kept on taking. However, he was sure he would soon be able to surpass him. All because he had something Lucian would never understand. Desperation. His fingers twitched. I'm not going to lose to you, Luke growled through gritted teeth, voice raw. You're not the only one who can climb to the top. The whispers stilled, if only for a moment. That sliver of clarity, of defiance. It was enough. The darkness surged forward again, one final time, threatening to consume him whole. But Luke roared. The entire hotel room shook violently as unknown energy erupted from his body, incinerating the floor around him in a perfect, circular blast. The whispers shrieked and recoiled. Smoke and dust filled the room. Then silence. Luke rose from the cracked floor, his body steaming. His breath was ragged. Blood and sweat streaked down his face. But his eyes glowed like blue gems, narrowed and sharp with feral determination. He looked at his trembling hands. I almost lost myself, he muttered. But not today. Luke had done it. He had become a gladiator on his own. Luke felt every fiber of his body twitching and contracting with pain, but also with power. A wide, unsettling grin stretched across his face as he clenched his hands into fists. Limping from the strain, he grimaced and collapsed onto his bed, desperate for a moment of rest after the momentous task of ascending to the sixth sequence. One step at a time, he muttered to himself. He stared at the ceiling, lost in thought, before closing his eyes, visions of his newly awakened abilities flashing before him. Upgraded abilities: combat intuition, martial foresight, grants visions a few seconds into the future during combat, allowing perfect counters and movement predictions. Rapid recovery, healing factor, accelerated healing, enabling swift recovery from injuries, capable of regenerating limbs over time. Unbreakable will, immune to fear, mind control, and illusions in battle. His mind becomes a weapon, sharp, focused, unyielding. Armor of the ancients, spiritual armor. Conjures spectral armor as hard as diamond, but weightless and ethereal. Spectral arena summon. Creates an illusory or semi-real battlefield, forcing close-quarters combat and nullifying ranged attacks. Blood empowerment. Gains strength, speed, or healing from every drop of spilled blood, ally or enemy. The battlefield becomes his fuel. Warrior's aura. Radiates an aura that boosts allies' courage and strength while sowing confusion, fear, and hesitation among foes. Ha 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 ha. Luke laughed, placing a hand over his eyes. Can this day get any better? Thanks to healing factor, the pain from his ascension began to ebb away. Within seconds, his body was already recovering, stronger, more complete. But then, the laughter died just as quickly as it had come. His hand slid down from his face as his exhilaration faded. How could I have been so blind? He muttered, clicking his tongue. I should have realized it sooner. The reason they were getting so strong, Lucian, Talia, even Annabeth, and she isn't one of the big three, they all possess a card. I let my pride, my sense of superiority, cloud my judgment. I actually thought I was chosen. How pathetic. He stared at his hands, clenching them again. But the question still remains. Who gave us these cards? Where did they come from? His voice dropped into a whisper. Whose pawn am I this time? A week later, Lucian leaned back, eyes half-lidded, as a black spear whizzed past his face. He ducked immediately, avoiding a radiant sword aimed at his neck. Calmly, he weaved through the barrage of attacks that relentlessly came at him. His arms remained crossed over his chest as he watched Nox and Lucerna flank him from either side, doing their best to land a hit. But Lucian danced through their strikes, flipping, ducking, sidestepping, his movement almost lazy in its precision. His frown deepened as his feet glided across the polished marble floor of the training facility within the camp. Stop being so basic with your attacks, Lucian chided, raising a leg to block Nox's punch. Yes, simplicity can be effective, but that doesn't mean your mind should be simple too. He leaned back, narrowly dodging Lucerna's stab, then uncrossed his arms and snatched her extended hand. With one swift kick, he launched Nox back before pivoting and hurling Lucerna into him. Nox caught her, but the force sent both of them sliding across the floor. Lucian straightened up, his gaze drifting toward the kneeling spirits in the distance, both gasping for breath, clearly drained. It was always like this when they trained with him. They glared at him in frustration, watching how effortlessly composed he remained, one arm tucked behind his back, the other outstretched, motioning them to come again. Around them, other demigods were engaged in their own sparring sessions, training techniques, battling one another. They had grown used to seeing Nox and Lucerna around. It had been strange at first, but now it was just part of daily camp life. Not far away, Talia was seen sparring against Nico and Bianca. Both looked like they were on the verge of tears under Talia's brutal training. Nico, in particular, was already crying, wildly swinging his saber between sobs. Talia barely blinked before raising her leg and sending him tumbling with a kick. Meanwhile, Percy and Clarice were locked in combat, their polearms clashing with force. Percy was steadily improving, pushing Clarice harder with each round. She had no choice but to adapt or risk falling behind. Shadow and light are among the most malleable elements. Well, all elements are, if you think about it, Lucian said casually. But that's not the point. The point is, don't stick to a single weapon. Adapt. Keep your opponents guessing. Never let them learn your rhythm. Nox and Lucerna split up, charging from opposite directions. They darted in wide arcs, trying to disorient him. But Lucian's eyes tracked their every movement, sharp and unwavering. Suddenly, they stopped, raising their hands. From each of them burst forth a swirling arsenal of their respective elements. Solidified blades and sharp constructs of light and shadow hovered around them like deadly satellites before launching toward Lucian. Reacting instantly, Lucian swung one arm and one leg back before springing into the air. He twisted mid-leap, spinning rapidly, becoming a blur of motion, a deadly top. The blades sliced through the air, missing him by inches. In the midst of the storm, Lucian lashed out, snatching the hilt of a shadow-forged longsword in one hand and a light-forged naginata in the other. He cracked his arms like whips, sending the shadow, sword slashing toward Lucerna and the naginata arcing toward Nox. He then paused, glancing at his hands, one burned slightly by the intense heat of light, the other peeling from darkness's corrosive edge. Lucian smirked. A fist flew toward him. He blocked it with a palm. Another. He caught it, a miniature shockwave erupting on impact. Both spirits gritted their teeth, struggling to overpower him, but he held firm. With a grin, he tightened his grip on their fists, leaned back, and yanked them toward each other, bonk. Ow! Damn it, Lucerna. You and your big head. My big head. You're literally just a head with eyes. I'd rather have just eyes than a big mouth like yours. You take that back. Nua. Lucian watched their back and forth with amusement before rolling his eyes. Enough, you two. They both hissed at each other, electric sparks crackling in the air between them. Ahem. They froze and slowly turned to Lucian, who now stood with arms crossed and a raised brow. Sorry, father. They mumbled in unison. Still not used to that. Lucian sighed inwardly. Anyway, training's done for today. Annabeth wants us down there. Lucerna lit up, clasping her hands with a bright smile. Is our little brother finally ready to be born? Nox remained silent, far less excited than his sister. Please don't phrase it like that, Lucian said with a grimace. Makes it sound like Annabeth's pregnant or something. He shook his head and gestured for them to follow. Come on, she doesn't like being kept waiting. Both spirits shrank down to their smaller forms, conserving energy, and fluttered onto Lucian's shoulders as he exited the facility. Lucian walked down toward the basement of his cabin, where he found Annabeth putting the finishing touches on her latest creation. She paused and turned as he entered. Oh, you're here, and right on time, too. I'm almost done. Can you go and get Talia? Talia? Why? Why do you need Talia? Lucian asked, raising an eyebrow and giving her a puzzled look. I've finished preparing the third one, and I'm almost done with the fourth, Annabeth said. And for that, I'm going to need Talia. Nope, Lucian replied flatly, shaking his head. Annabeth's grin widened as she leaned forward, chuckling to herself. She set down what she was working on and walked over with her arms outstretched, wrapping them around Lucian's torso. Looking up at him with a teasing expression and curling one leg up behind her, she asked, Are you perhaps jealous? No. Lucian answered in a flat tone, showing no emotion. By the gods, you're so adorable, Annabeth said, rubbing her face against his chest. Then she looked up again and added playfully, just so we're clear, for the fourth one, you're going to be part of it too. I need all three of you. I see. I'll go get Talia, then, Lucian replied with a small, fleeting smile. Annabeth let out a light laugh, her eyes softening as she looked up at him. Her grin curved into a mischievous smile. I could add Percy too. He might be useful. I could use him. Sure, Lucian said nonchalantly. Annabeth blinked, caught off guard by his easy agreement. Before she could question it, Lucian continued. If you want to send him to an early grave, that is. His expression shifted into one of disdain. Annabeth burst into a fit of chiming giggles. Rising onto her tiptoes, she gave Lucian a quick peck on the lips, then another and another. With her hands pressed against his chest, she said, "Wow. I absolutely go crazy when you show how possessive you can be." Lucian rolled his eyes. "I'm going to get Talia now." Annabeth gave him one last kiss, lingering longer than necessary. "Yeah, you go do that." Nox and Lucerna, shielding their eyes, floated down from Lucian's shoulders toward Annabeth as Lucian sank into his shadows and vanished. A few minutes later, he returned, this time with Talia. Lucian stared at her in disbelief. "What the hell did you do to Nico to make him cry like that? I've never seen someone sobbing out of happiness just because I took you away. What's the opposite of grieving?" "Because that's what he was doing, celebrating your departure." Talia rolled her eyes. "Your brother's just a coward. He has no fear, though." "What did you do to him, Talia?" Lucian asked, completely baffled. What kind of monster could instill fear in a fearless kid? "Oh, you two are here. Great," Annabeth said, tossing them an empty core. The same type used for Lucerna and Nox. "Just one?" Lucian asked as Talia caught it one-handed. "Yeah, the fourth one. Number 3 is special. He won't need one," Annabeth replied. "So what do we fill it with?" Talia asked, twirling the orb in her hand. "Lightning? My lightning and Lucian's magnetism." "Oh no, mist," Annabeth said. "It's more useful than lightning. More versatile, too. I could make lightning with the right weapon. That's easy. But controlling the mist? That takes either being a child of the Big Three or a daughter of the goddess of magic. I'm neither. So I figured, why not borrow the skill?" "That's actually smart," Lucian nodded. "The mist has helped me in a lot of ways. It's definitely one of my most useful abilities. I'm not as good with it as Lucian, but I really should develop it more," Talia said thoughtfully. "And combining it with my wind manipulation might enhance its potential." She held the orb between them. Lucian took hold of it, and they both closed their eyes. A hazy mist began to swirl and envelop the room. But before it could fully take over, it was siphoned into the orb. The core glowed brighter and brighter until it turned a radiant violet. Once it was full and couldn't absorb any more, Talia casually tossed it to Annabeth. Her shadow rose and caught it in a dark tendril, gently placing it in her hand. Annabeth walked over and set it down in the middle of a magic circle. On closer inspection, Lucian noticed that the circle had changed. New shapes and inscriptions now decorated the floor, humming with arcane energy. Lucian's eyebrows furrowed as he tilted his head to study the inscriptions. While observing, he asked, "And what exactly is this third one you mentioned? And why doesn't the fourth one have a body?" "That's because the fourth one is going to create its own body," Annabeth replied, stepping off to the side where she couldn't be seen. "As for the third one," she grunted as she returned, waddling in with a bucket gripped tightly in both hands. With every step, a sloshing noise echoed from within the container. She let out a sigh of relief as she set it down inside the magic circle, right beside the mist-filled core. Lucian leaned over to peek inside, and a radiant golden bronze shimmer reflected out, making him blink a bit surprised as he can already make out what Annabeth was planning to do. "Is that the celestial bronze I told you to get me?" Annabeth grinned proudly. "Yup, that's good old number 3. Living. Liquid. Metal," she sang, emphasizing each L and M with a playful twist of her tongue. She chuckled before continuing, "I don't know if you've noticed, but each one follows a party system. Nox is my rogue assassin. Lucerna's my warrior healer. Number 3 here is going to be my tank scout, and number 4 will be my mage support." "All right, that's honestly impressive," Talia said, genuinely surprised by the level of thought Annabeth had put into it. If it were up to her, she probably would have just made them all walking weapons. Lucian looked equally impressed and gave Annabeth a respectful nod. Then his expression turned puzzled. "Wait, are you planning to create both of them at the same time?" "Yup," Annabeth replied with a pop of her lips. "If I do one at a time, I'll probably pass out after the fourth. So I figured I might as well knock myself out in one go and get it over with." Lucian stared at her, exasperated. He ran his hand by his face and asked, "Annabeth, how can you be both incredibly smart and unbelievably stupid at the same time?" "Oh, That's easy, she said with a bright smile, flashing him a peace sign. I learned that from you. Huh? Talia burst out laughing. Lucian stared at Annabeth with a flat, half-lidded expression, blinking at her with an unimpressed look in his eyes. Annabeth giggled at his look and waved it off. Sorry, but come on, you know it's kind of true. That's why it's so funny, Talia said, laughing harder and slapping Lucian's back repeatedly. I hate you both, Lucian muttered under his breath. Talia and Annabeth exchanged mischievous grins. We love you too, they sang in unison.
Hello, everyone. As we wrap up this video, I want to share a quick note. I have a Patreon account. If you'd like to support me and enjoy on-demand audiobooks, you can become a Patreon member. Alternatively, you can check out my Google Drive link, which has 500+ novel audiobooks available through my Ko-fi or Patreon shop. I appreciate your support.